give it another minute.
You're all set. We're live.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. Are we live? We're live. And we have a quorum. So I'm going to call this meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. I'll remind everybody that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. And this meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 10 people. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or a device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. And it's November 18th, then could we have a roll call vote for attendance, Maria?
Ms. Watson. Ms. Watson? Hello? Can you hear me, Sam?
Now I can hear you. Yes,
Okay.
here.
Thank you. Ms. Weason?
Here.
Kathy Clancy?
She's going to be late.
Okay. Mr. Favazza? He's not here yet. Chairman Pope?
Here,
Ms. Prince?
Here.
And Mayor Taken. She is not here.
She's texting me right now again, Maria, saying she can't get in.
I'll try sending it to her again.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Okay, we'll wave the salute to the flag and we'll go directly to oral communications. Oral communications, the public shall have the opportunity at every regular school committee meeting to be heard under oral communications. Oral communications shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to the school committee business to appear before the school committee. State their problem without debate, and the matter will be referred to the proper subcommittee. For items that are on the agenda, members of the public may address the committee with the permission of the chair. Persons speaking under oral communications shall be limited to 3 minutes and shall submit a copy of their prepared communication to the recording secretary. The school committee chair shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. And so we will open oral communications. And we have one person raising the hand, Deb Talp. You can speak if you, Deb.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. This is Deb Tellep. I'm a West Parish parent, and I just wanted to take this chance to talk to the school committee who are planning for a new school. And I've been in and I have been to have my kids at West Parish, and it's a wonderfully remodeled, beautiful building. There was one thing that was surprising to me as a parent, to learn that West Parish was built without a dishwasher, without the capability to wash reusable dishware, silverware, plates, all of that. So it was a real surprise to me as a parent there to realize that every day styrofoam, trays were thrown away and there was no plan for sustainability. Now, I did work with a teacher there, Adrian Rickyman, and their green team students and my children there as well. And through the support of local business, we got compostable trays to be installed instead of styrofoam. And then with the styrofoam ban in the city, the compostable trays were the plan. But in terms of long-term sustainability. My concern is that it's much more sustainable to use a dishwasher and reusable dishware and silverware, and to build a new school without the capability to do that really limits the possibilities in the future. And then I learned that West Parish was originally designed with a dishwasher, but that was eliminated in some of the planning stages. So I just wanted to make sure that that parents and school committee members are aware, because I wasn't aware, that this is something that is part of the planning process, and just to encourage for the sustainability and the future of our children, who see what we're doing and learn from us about how to make a more sustainable future. So I wanted to put that out there as you're just getting into your planning stage for the new building.
Thank you very much. We are aware of the issue, and it is on the, it will be addressed probably sometime in January or February, and we will look for public input. As of right now, there's capacity for dishwashing and storage utensils and plates at the new school. There's actually room for that at West Parish, should we be able to support that with the added help, et cetera, that would be required. So thank you very much, and stay tuned, because we will be talking about this as the year goes on.
Thank you.
Mary Ann. Mary Ann Boucher.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ann Boucher, 93 Mount Pleasant. While we're on the subject of West, oh, I hear a dog barking. My husband and I drove around to the city elementary schools approximately a month ago. I wanted to look at all of the properties. As you know, I've been very active in this school project. But what my husband and I found when we entered West Parish School was a bit alarming to us. The retention pond has those drains, and one of the drain covers was ajar. I actually got out of my car, and my husband was getting ready to get out, and I asked him to please let me see if I could lift it. Because I figured at 128 pounds, if I could lift it, that a fourth or fifth grader could easily lift it. And I could move that cover, and I put that cover back on the drain. Now that drain, we looked in, it was approximately, I don't know, at least 6 to 8 feet down with a good amount of water in it. Now, if children were there by themselves, we know how curious kids are. I'm just curious as to why there is no locking mechanism or something to prevent kids from falling into this drain that is literally wide enough for my entire body to go right down in. So I just wanted to throw this out there that it could be a potential serious hazard, and hopefully something can be done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pope, I will reach out to DPW and
Yeah,
inquire about that.
thank you. I don't see anybody else, so we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the recognitions. Does anybody have any recognitions? No?
I have one, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see everybody. Thanks.
That's okay. I didn't raise my hand. I should have.
Go right ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I just want to thank Rockport Music and the Shaylin Liu Performing Arts Center for putting on a really terrific performance this afternoon for the K-5 Remote Academy. Alexa Tarantino and Stephen Feifke did a jazz performance and workshop from New York, from New York City. It was extremely well attended. We had about 160 students log on, and an hour's worth of music, and lots and lots, hundreds of questions and answers in the queue. But I just wanted to thank Rockport Music for their generosity and for such a terrific instructional afternoon. And a lot of students, from the comments I saw, got really hooked on the idea of taking up an instrument. So we'd like to do more of that, and we're thankful to Rockport Music.
Great, thank you. Any others? Okay, then we will move on to the Gloucester High School Student Advisory Council. And I don't know if there's anybody here.
Jonathan, they were invited, but I don't see any of them here.
Yeah, I don't either. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like to be removed for further discussion? Okay, seeing
I
none.
move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second,
Second. Roll call vote, Maria.
Ms. Watson,
yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
yes,
Okay. The consent agenda passes unanimously, and we'll move on to our deliberations on educational issues. And first up is the superintendent's update on the schools, and we're joined once again by Karen Carroll, who I'm sure everybody wants to ask questions. Okay, so Ben, it's all yours.
Okay, there we go, unmuted. I will start by sharing just a quick update, and then we'll get right to Ms. Carroll. Let me just share this quickly. You can see a presentation. Great. You can still see a presentation? Okay, great. So just a few things, our primary objective. I've modified this a little bit after a few months because
Ben,
oh,
Ben, sorry, we actually only see remote learning. Does it?
yep, let me try again then. Nope, that's not what I want you to see. Hold on. What we'll do is we will skip I'll just give you a quick overview of what we're going to discuss tonight, and then we'll get right to Ms. Carroll, and we'll figure out the technology a little bit later. So a few updates. First of all, we have Karen Carroll here. She's going to discuss where the city is in terms of COVID, and then help us understand where also, then I'll discuss where the schools are, and then have a discussion with the committee just about where we go from here. Because of the recent changes around the state and in the city. And then we will get an update led by Assistant Superintendent Greg Bach about our fall benchmark assessments in K through 8. And then we'll have a quick update on the East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School Building Project. And then also then review the superintendent's goals and evaluation process. So at that, I'll hand it over to our Gloucester Department of Health Director, Karen Carroll, to give us an update on COVID in the city. Welcome again. Good to see you, Karen. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, Superintendent Lummis, and school committee members. Nice to see you all again. It's been a few weeks. I thought I would just go through the indicators that we talked about last time, and I'll give you a quick update on those indicators, even though some of those are kind of have changed recently with the state. And then we can talk about what's happening locally and some changes at the policy level as well. So here in Gloucester, our first indicator that the state tracks the first six is the positivity rate. So the percentage of tests that are positive out of all the COVID tests being conducted. And all of Cape Ann, I'm happy to report at the moment, is underneath the 2%. I think Gloucester was around 1.7 or 8 last Thursday. Those numbers come out on a Thursday. And we are significantly below the state average there. And we are sitting below 2%, which is great. The deaths, we've had no new deaths in Gloucester for many months now, which is also wonderful news. We only have one person in the hospital who's been in the hospital for quite some time, but no new hospitalizations. The healthcare system, the healthcare capacity is a tough one for me to talk about because, but we do have on Thursday mornings, we have the hospital on our task force and they report through, and they are seeing an uptick in cases in both hospitals, in their emergency rooms. So we're starting to see here on Cape Ann and North Shore a little bit of an uptick in our hospitals, similar to what we're seeing statewide. But we are still have plenty of capacity in our local healthcare system. The testing capacity is an interesting one. The state, I should just say, no longer uses these 6 indicators. They used to have them green and yellow, but last week they changed a lot of the way in which they report data. And it's no longer on the daily dashboard, any kind of color coding. But I can just talk generally about testing capacity. And as the numbers increase, we are seeing strains on that, and we are seeing longer wait times to both get a test and also to get the results. Not a long wait time for getting the results yet, but we are hearing just today alone, each day with the people making plans to travel, there's more and more pressure on the testing system. Our testing sites locally have reported increases, longer waits, and that's a challenge. That's going to be a challenge for us. And if it slows down that turnaround time, it also is a challenge. So it's definitely something we're watching closely. We have more options for testing than we did in the fall. But testing, I would say statewide, is definitely being strained right now. And largely, we think because of people wanting to be tested before they travel or thinking that it clears them to be with family on Thanksgiving. So just a reminder that that's not really the purpose of this testing sites, and it will strain the system. Anyway, we are seeing some of that. This CTC, our ability to contact trace at the state, they have capacity and they are taking cases. There are definitely limitations with the state's ability and their teams. They are actively recruiting more members to do tracing with them. At this point, we very infrequently use the state tracing team. Mainly because we like ours better and we like that personal local contact, and we like to be able to connect people immediately to services. We also found a few little glitches and hiccups and delays in the reporting when the state did our tracing. So it's wonderful it's there. We are lucky to be in Massachusetts. We do use that team. We do fully expect that they will continue to be there and expand their capacity and their expertise. But at the moment, we have enough capacity with our own team to trace our own COVID positives and all of their contacts. One thing that I can say about that will overwhelm all of our capacity pretty quickly is the number of contacts that we're seeing. So last spring when COVID hit and there was a pretty quick lockdown, we saw that people who were being tested, and wasn't as much testing. So we're really only testing a smaller number of people who are very sick. And we were finding that they had very few contacts. So the contact tracing was a lot simpler. What we are seeing now, both locally, Cape Ann, North Shore, Massachusetts, is that it's affecting a younger population who are working, studying, going to college, moving about the community fairly normally. So when we do have a case, we're finding 20, 30 contacts for some people. And again, not unique to Gloucester. It's just takes a lot more time and a lot more resources from our tracing team. So again, why, we're really encouraging people to keep those contacts small, keep so that if you are exposed, we're not going to use all our resources tracking down 30 people. Which is an enormous effort. The incident map. So the incident is another indicator the state uses, the famous incident map. And many of you may know about 2 weeks ago, they changed the calculation with that. So a whole bunch of towns that were red moved down into the yellow or green. And basically they did a couple of things. They adjusted the calculations for both size of the community, and also they included positivity rate. So you can't get into the red unless you have a high enough incidence rate, which is that average of 10 per day, as well as a 5% positivity rate. And that's very high. And what I told you now is we're under 2%, we're at 1.6 or 7%. But if you have both of those things, that's what you need in order to become a red high-risk community now. So you will see on the map, there are still several in Massachusetts that are considered red. But the governor, again, wants us to sort of view this data in conjunction with all of our other data to see where the red is happening, where these cases are and what is going on in the community. So even if you go red, it doesn't mean a community necessarily has to do anything straight away. After 3 weeks, there are some changes. So that's that map. I know it's really confusing. People are very confused about how it's changed and why. But basically, it's to kind of combine a few different indicators into a color so that you're getting a little more nuanced idea in that map of it's not just incidents. There's a little more information in there, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think 3 indicators is better than 1. And, but again, those 3 aren't the only 3. So the wastewater. So as you know, we continue to test our wastewater every week. And the last 2 weeks, we've seen a significant increase. So 2 weeks ago, we went from, I don't know, maybe 30,000 or 40,000 virus particles to 100,000. And so that's about 10 times what we saw in August. Just to kind of put it in perspective, we did have a little spike in the virus level in the wastewater back in October when we had our outbreak here in our community. But it did come back down somewhat, and then it shot back up to that 100 level where it stayed for 2 weeks now. So, again, what that tells us is there's a lot more virus floating around the community. It doesn't tell us much about, doesn't tell us much more than that. It just tells us there's more virus. We don't know if there's, a bunch of really sick people shedding a lot of virus, or if there's a lot more asymptomatic people shedding a lower level of virus. We just know that in general, the virus level is higher in our community in the last 2 weeks and has kind of steadily climbed through the fall, which is exactly what we would expect. It was concerning to see the jump, but then positive to see it hold for two weeks. So it'll be interesting to see again how this week works. But we see that, as something that we need to pay close attention to as well. And I think it did reflect another uptick in cases as well. The school indicators, again, the DESE indicators that you guys track, we have not triggered any of those thresholds yet the entire time we've been in school. So that's great. In terms of our case numbers, we have 48 active cases as of today. And there is no real trend. They seem to be connected to household transmission, private gatherings, social events. We're seeing very little transmission widespread in any kind of agency or industry. So what it tells us is that schools and businesses are largely doing the right thing, and people are wearing face coverings when they're inside these places. But again, when they're in people's private homes and having private gatherings, they're letting down their guard, and that is where the transmission's occurring. Again, not unique to Gloucester. We're seeing that same, roughly that same data throughout the state, and I don't know nationwide. We're also seeing increase in carpooling, where people are not are with people that are not from their household, all sharing the same car. It's a pretty small enclosed space, and the virus tends to transmit pretty easily there. So we're trying to do a lot of targeted outreach through our department in the mayor's office. The state is doing the same around these private gatherings, keeping that size small, keeping it outside if you can. But, you know, again, it's getting harder and colder and all of those things. So again, we're still seeing very few older adults in our community getting the virus or getting very sick from the virus. So that's a good thing. And we're not seeing really any in-school transmission. We're not seeing any nursing home transmission. And so those are very good things, or senior housing. So some of our higher risk, more vulnerable areas, we seem to be doing a good job protecting those populations. So I think that's it, unless you want me to talk about the mitigation strategy of having sort of breaks or stay at home, or is that going to be discussed after?
Yeah, so thank you, Karen. I'll only show a few things to update the committee just on what's happening in the schools, and then we can get into a discussion and some Q&A.
Okay.
So let me just try this again. So if this works this time. Second here. Okay. Please tell me you can see the presentation. Okay, great. Here we go. So that's just what we're going to go over. Karen Carroll is here, as it says, which is great. We always like having her here. I'll talk about the cases reported in the schools. Sorry. That there continues to be no school-based transmission, and then we'll talk a little about Thanksgiving break, and then we'll pause then for more conversation. So we'll talk about this more tonight, but this goes back to our guiding beliefs when we were planning in the summer for opening school, which of course we've done very well. I've highlighted one of them because it remains very true. It's where we have been all summer and fall, is that our decisions need to be based on facts, science, and data. In particular, make sure our decisions are being based on what's happening here in Gloucester. And what's really been helpful all the way through, and especially again tonight, is Karen and her staff have been great in helping us understand exactly what's going on the ground and in families and in the whole community across Gloucester. So this is just gives you, so folks can see this, and also folks can see this, you know, when we look back at this presentation, is just how it's been changing. And these are the active cases. You heard Karen tonight say 48 active cases, but you can see it when, you know, from high down to low, up again. And we're all hoping by working together, we can get it down low again. And we'll talk about some ways to do that tonight. Not only in our schools, but across the city. So right now we have 26 total cases in the schools since the beginning of the school year. 20 of those resolved, 6 are currently active. And all those 6 cases are new this past week. We had 2 full weeks of no new cases, and that ended last Friday, and 6 since then. So that's obviously a change. We are seeing more close contacts in the schools, but those are coming primarily from folks who are close contacts to family members or friends or associations outside of school. So events that are happening outside of school, they have a close contact. Therefore, they, of course, need to be out of school until they're quarantined for 14 days. So we still are seeing no transmission within our schools, which is great. That's, as you know, it continues to be that way, which is wonderful. But again, we have more folks quarantining now in our schools than recently because they're close contacts due to outside or outside school transmission in the community. That's really important. That's really important as we go forward. So one of the main questions is, what are we going to do? And we're hearing this from staff, from families, from people in the community. And the big question is here, Thanksgiving break, what will we do? So at this point, we currently plan on staying with our in-person hybrid learning models, but is in capitals in red for a good reason. That can all change quickly if we don't all make the right choices. I'm sending out I sent a staff message over the weekend, really encouraging our staff to keep it up and keep us in, and making sure they understood that community transmission is happening now outside of the schools, but our decisions that we make outside of schools help us stay in school. And tonight, a similar message will be going out to families. And what everyone needs to know is that we are continuing to closely monitor the local data, the citywide transmission, the school transmission, all the data that Karen talked about tonight, the contact tracing data, and that information will help us make good choices going forward. But we do want to stay in school for all the reasons we've talked about. It's safer in many ways for our kids to be in school because we can monitor and make sure they're distanced and following safety protocols, but also for mental health reasons, social reasons, academic reasons. So we do want to keep that up as long as possible. So just a message I wanted the whole community to hear, and I would like all of us to reiterate in our classrooms, in our homes, is that staying in school really depends entirely on what each of us and our families do over the next couple of weeks. You need to keep following safety protocols outside of school when you're people that you don't live with, and even with your family. The good news is we really know these now. We know about mask wearing. We are great at it here in Gloucester. We know about distancing. We know about hand hygiene. But what's really important here is we do those things even with members of our family, especially those who we may visit with who don't live with us. Just because they're in our family doesn't mean they're immune to COVID. It doesn't mean we're immune from getting it from them. And it seems not only in Gloucester, but across the Commonwealth, that folks are just getting comfortable and want to see their families. Totally understandable. But even when you're with your family, especially those family members you don't live with, please, families, staff, everyone, wear masks. Stay 6 feet away as much as possible. Shorter visits are always better. And one thing that the state is very much saying, Governor Baker is very much saying, is don't have meals with people you don't live with. That is particularly hard at this time of year with the holidays coming up. But there are ways to do that and still be safe. We're also communicating with staff earlier this week and tonight with families about the Massachusetts State Travel Order. We obviously are concerned about families and others who travel for the holidays. There are only 4 states in the United States right now that are free from the travel order. That is Vermont, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, and of course, Hawaii. If folks are going to those places, they're okay. They can go there and travel back freely. But any other state and anywhere abroad, folks who return from there have got to get a test and have it come back negative before they can come back into school. Or those students have to be out of school for 14 days quarantining, which we do not want them to be. We want them to be in school where they're safe and can learn. So that information is also going out to families tonight, but for everyone who's listening, really important you understand the Massachusetts State Travel Order and plan ahead so your students can come back into school or staff can be back into school on Monday the 30th. So that's where we are right now, both with the community transmission and school update, and also what we're thinking about in terms of staying in school through after Thanksgiving. Again, I do want to stress that it can all change depending on what all of us do and our choices that we make and the data as it develops. So I'll stop sharing now and see if the committee has questions for Ms. Carroll or myself.
Questions? Laura.
Ben, I just wanted to clarify one thing in what you just said. The states listed, I think you mentioned Rhode Island as a place that we
Oh,
can
my
go.
God. No, that's right. That's wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank you. It's Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine.
Right.
And
Hawaii, of course.
in Hawaii.
Vermont.
Hawaii.
Thank you. Yes, not Rhode Island.
Right.
My daughter is there and she's not coming back because of that. But, oh well.
So, and if I can just add on the travel order, we were told today that there will be likely to be two states moved into the higher risk category. So by Friday, and they're likely to be the neighboring states to us. So my guess from what we're hearing from the Department of Public Health is that by Friday, it's quite possible that New Hampshire and Vermont will also be excluded from, well, be included in the travel order. So they will be considered higher risk states. When you come back, you will need the test or the quarantine.
That means go visit your family in Maine, just them.
So, but I did have a question, if that was just a clarification
Oh,
question.
thank you for the clarification. Yep.
Karen, thank you for being here. Just as a question about the wastewater levels, is what we're seeing now comparable to what you saw around the time of the spike we had before?
It's comparable. It's a little higher than when we had the spike. So I think when we had the spike, we were seeing about 50,000, 60,000 particles, and now we're per liter. And now we saw this 100,000 the last couple of days. And again, it's very hard to know, is this a lot of people maybe on the beginning part of their infection, and so they're shedding higher virus? Is this people, or is it people who are asymptomatic and who are going to stay that way? Or is it even people who are never going to get the disease? They're just have the virus in them, kind of thing. So they're not actually going to get COVID-19. So we don't really know, but we know that there's 10 times more virus in our wastewater last Tuesday than the Tuesday in August. And I think that's kind of a way to think about it. And that we're not seeing it come down. It after our spike in October, it came down a little, but it didn't come back down to August levels. And then it rose again for 2 weeks to a little bit higher than where we were in October.
So I'm just to ask, so hypothetically, given all the things you just said, we could have far more in the community than our numbers are indicating, right? There could be far more community spread that we just, people asymptomatic, or people haven't been tested. We just don't know.
Right. And when you say far more, it's hard to know, are there people that have COVID-19 that didn't get tested? Or are they people that are just have the virus in their body, but they're not sick and they're not getting COVID-19 and they're not, but the virus is there. So there's no way to know that. But yeah, there is definitely more virus in our community now than any other time. And I imagine that if we tested the whole state, we would see the same thing. We would see that there is more virus around, and it's just, other than that, it's hard to draw a whole lot more conclusions from it. But I think it's important to pay attention to. I think it means it's here. It's increasing in the community, and whether we know it or we know who it's coming from and how sick they are, if they even get sick at all, is kind of irrelevant with this one, because it moves between people who are not sick or don't have the disease.
So I'll let others ask questions, and I'll ask a follow-up if I have an opportunity. Thank you.
Melissa?
Question for Karen, a quick question on the same line as Laura's question, but I also have a question for Ben as well. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us. You're always very helpful to this discussion. So I appreciate you taking the time tonight. So along the lines of the wastewater, can you tell me, and I've wanted to ask you this question in the past, knowing that a large portion of the city of Gloucester is on septic, how does the city view the results of the wastewater, knowing that it's not actually testing everyone in Gloucester?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there a certain alarm rate? Because say it's 3/4. I don't even know what the city sewer is, but say it's a quarter of the city is not on city sewer. How do you take that into consideration when you're diagnosing Gloucester due to the wastewater?
Yep, great question. I think, I mean, the other piece in that is that it includes a lot of Essex. So
Yeah,
it's not a pure sample of everyone in just Gloucester. You're looking at a rough, broad community picture. I think Mike told us on a call back in the fall that maybe 10 or 20% of the city is on its own private system, but I'd have to check on that number. He answered this question back, but most of Gloucester, I think it's 80%, are on our town septic system, and then most of Essex as well. So again, the main difference between the wastewater testing and the case testing we know about is that the wastewater tests everybody, whereas the testing and the case numbers we know about, the positivity rate we know about, those are only people who have gone to get tests, and it usually means they have symptoms or have had an exposure, or they're part of some widespread testing in a nursing home or something. So it's not an exact science, and that's why you can never correlate and say, well, you know, we have 10 people with COVID in Gloucester, we should have 50,000 particles of virus. It will never work that way, and people shed different amounts of viruses just depending on who they are and also where they are in the process. So again, it's just a way to monitor a different population than we can monitor with the Department of Public Health stuff. You know, that only gives us a very small percentage of the people in our community. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
it does. Thank you. I appreciate that. And if I may, can I just ask Ben a question? Because it may trigger me to ask Karen another question if I get an opportunity.
I think that was a go ahead.
Okay, sorry, my screen's frozen out. So Ben, I just wanted to ask, have you surveyed our staff to find out who is traveling out of state, the staff and the students? Have you done any type of survey or outreach? I did see in one community, they sent out an affidavit to all the families and staff, making them sign it, stating if they did travel, they'd have to test when they come back. But I'm wondering if we've done any proactive outreach to find out what percentage of students and staff are traveling over the next couple of days.
No, we haven't. I hadn't thought of that in terms of it didn't cross my mind because it seems like a very personal matter, but it also is a public health matter. I understand that. So we have not. We can look into the feasibility of that, I suppose. I hadn't, yeah. But we haven't done anything like that yet.
I'm just concerned, especially knowing that Karen told us that tomorrow New Hampshire may be added to the list. And I know I'm someone that was planning on traveling to New Hampshire, but if they pop up on the list, then I'm not going to go. So I'm just wondering how many others would have plans and how the school is going to recognize the amount of staff members that may be traveling that may have to get tested. And if testing is being delayed, the diagnosis of those tests, how are we going to handle the teachers not coming back, or can they come back until they get their diagnosis? It just seems like there's a lot unanswered there.
Sure. So what I was intending to do tonight is share after the family message goes out, to share with the school committee the staff message and the family message. In the staff message, I was very clear about, Monday, November 30th is a work day, and we expect everyone back at work. And because of that, it was a very clear message to plan ahead, with if you are traveling, getting tested in enough time so your results are back prior to Monday. I was very clear about that. Got some good positive response from it. I hope people are taking it to heart. I also raised was very clear, I think, in the risk to our schools functioning properly if people are out. I'm not quite sure I can do much more than that in terms of holding people accountable. But did send a very clear message about what our expectations are to be back at work on Monday, and also the real risk to the proper functioning of our schools if folks aren't. So, but happy to talk about more. If the school committee wants to do more than that, I'm happy to talk about that.
Well, we're on to questions right now. Joel,
Thank you. So just, I'm not saying I'm supporting this, but just throwing it out there. Would it make sense to see how this Monday goes? And if, it is problematic, would a, future plan be where we start building in, a remote return week, or would it be doubling down on the really emphasizing to staff like, hey, Monday Thanksgiving did not go well. We need to make different choices when the holiday break comes up in December. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, you mean not this Monday, but the Monday after Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Sorry. I'm
Right. I
talking
mean,
over here. Sorry about that.
we all want to get there. I understand that. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the challenges with this break, obviously, it being so short, you travel, you get a test, can you get it back, right? I'm still hesitant, but I'll be talking to more folks, both on the school committee, but in the district, but also outside the district, around extending a break with the thinking that allows folks to do what they need to get back. I think actually in many ways it may just extend the behavior that we want to, keep people from doing, honestly. I don't know if it actually helps getting people back, in a healthy fashion. What I think one advantage is, so I think you're right in learning from what happens the Monday after Thanksgiving and maybe be more direct even and seeing what other options we have. But I'm hoping that also the December break being longer allows folks to see folks if necessary or travel if they have to, and then plan properly and appropriately, given enough time to get back on time. Whether it's November 30th or January 4th, I think it is, or after any vacation, those are school days, those are important learning days, and we need all our staff here, obviously, even during, especially during times that are hard like this.
Can I just clarify too that any tests done for travel purposes are not covered by insurance? So it is a significant, it's another, barrier and challenge in all this. And they're not cheap. So it's $170, $180 usually for a COVID test. The PCR, it needs to be a PCR test.
And this is where we get into and we're really asking and encouraging families not to do the things they typically do. These are very, very difficult asks of our community, but really, not traveling, not spending Thanksgiving with large numbers of people you don't live with. This is what's going to keep the community safe. We know that. And so therefore you don't have to take a test. That's essentially, by choice. And those are difficult things for folks to do. I don't think any of us want to diminish that, but we do want to acknowledge what's going to help keep people safe and our students in school.
Yes, and also from the public health point of view, beyond the schools, we don't want to be draining our resources from the testing side, the tracing side, and the hospitalization side. Our healthcare workers are, begging us to take these precautions now. They are seeing what's ahead of them. They're seeing flu season when they're normally inundated. So, there's broader implications to the community as well.
Samantha?
I'm just curious if outside of the emails to families and staff, if there's other ways that we're sort of doing outreach to the community. I know in the past that Karen and Ben and Safathia have done interviews with 1623 that have been sort of floated out there. And I'm just curious, are there other ways that we can sort of get the message out outside of emails that, would just help in the effort? Whether that's reaching out to community organizations to make sure that there's a flyer that we can give them to send out to their contacts. I'm just trying to think outside of the box so that the more information, the better that we can get out.
So I know that the mayor is putting out public service announcements essentially. We'll use social media starting tomorrow with the message that I send out tomorrow. I mean, just after tonight. I think public service announcements from 1623 makes a lot of sense. I'm meeting with our monthly meeting with our parent leaders tomorrow, parent and family leaders tomorrow. I'm going to ask them to also get the word out. They're great messengers that families listen to. And happy to do other, I think this group could generate some ideas as well, but I think you're right, Samantha, whatever ways the community can get the word out is really, really important, because this really has to happen at a family level, these choices and decisions. So reaching as many families, our messages tonight will be translated, but there are lots of different community organizations that perhaps, if they're listening, or I can reach out to certainly through our community stakeholders group, so they can pass the word to their families they support.
And I can just add, from the health department's point of view, this has been our priority this week, and it will be next. We have a document coming out for college students. I was on 1623 yesterday. We are pushing messaging out as fast and as hard as we can in different languages. We are corresponding with all primary care doctors in the area to make sure that they are also supporting us with the messages we need to get out to the community. The state's done a great job. They've come up with some Thanksgiving, do's and don'ts. You've probably seen it on the mayor's Facebook page. It's on the health department's, the city website. So we're pushing out those kind of topical messages right now, and information about the quarantine order. I think the travel order, just went out today, or will be going out in multiple languages that most we get from the state, but some we've created ourselves. So we will continue to do that. We'll get them through to Ben. We disperse them to the COVID task force and then ask them to disseminate. So we will push them through your way, and whatever you can do to help the messaging, we appreciate too.
Christina, hi.
Hi, I'm on executive board for student council, and I wanted to know if you needed any information from this week.
Yes, you showed up a little late, and so we didn't see you when the time. Does anybody have objection if we get a report from us from Gloucester High School right now?
As long as we can go back to questions after that.
Okay, we can. Go ahead, Christina.
So for this week, elections were done in homeroom and they went very well. We are starting Italian tutoring and NHS tutoring, and we are doing that through FaceTimes and Zooms. 62 families have Thanksgiving baskets from NHS, which is something we're proud about. And for Spirit Week, everyone's been participating in that, and it's been a really good week to get kids into spirit, feeling comfortable in school, and wanting to participate in something fun.
Thank you. Any questions of Christina? Okay. Thank you very much, Christina, and thanks for the information, and we'll see you.
Thank you.
We'll go back to questions. Laura, you had another question?
I do, but I want to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to ask.
I don't see anybody raising their hand or.
Okay. So just one more suggestion on the outreach. I would go to the Cape Ann clergy group as well, and let the clergy be messengers. They can be very helpful messengers, I think. So I wanted to ask Karen, so now, I think the messaging is wonderful. I suspect there are going to be people who do have big events and come back into school. There's almost no way to prevent that. And once the kids are back in school, I guess I just want to ask you about, so we don't have, as you know, 6 feet distances between the kids in many places. And I think, we've been very successful and there hasn't been transmission and it's great, but there's the potential that there's going to be a lot more COVID coming in. We hope not, but it's possible. So I'm just wondering about your viewpoint on that. We still do have these sort of abbreviated distances, which hasn't proven to be an issue yet. And I'm just wondering sort of what you would say about that and if that could potentially become a danger.
I would say nothing's changed on that in terms of the research that came out this summer, that the 3 feet, 3 to 6 feet, it appears to not have a lot of transmission in that difference of footage for this age group. So there's no new position on that. And I think, you just said it, you answered the question. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen a transmission with kids sitting 4 feet apart compared to 6 feet apart. What it does do is it increases the number of contacts. So, it's a trade-off. Do you get the kids in school, and then the off chance that Joey gets sick, there's going to be a few more contacts, or do you leave them all out? And so it's all about trade-offs. And so, yeah, I think that would be my take on it too, that nothing's changed there. We're not seeing it a problem state-wise, nationally. None of the research or recommendations on that has changed. In fact, what I hear from the state and the epidemiologists is they feel even more confident with that 3 to 6 is fine. And so, yeah, I think we just carry on. And it's a bummer when a high school kid who is in a school who doesn't have 6 feet, and also the kids high school changes classes more frequently,
right?
So that's when we sometimes see these high number of contacts, and we kind of knew that that's part of this. It's part of this year is going to be the ins and outs. So the requirement or the definition of a close contact is not changed for that age group, but the research around safety is stayed the same as well. So,
okay,
hope that answers your question.
No, it does. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, if you're asking my comfort level, I could say if it was my child, I would be really, really happy for him to be in school and be within, less than 6 feet would not worry me at all.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Kathy, did you have a question?
My question is for Ben for future. You're going to be meeting with the parent group. It would be nice to know if they have any concerns or feedback. And I know you can kind of just send us something and not wait till the next meeting. So if there's anything you think we should know from that in terms of there's no way families are going to abide or comply with what we hope they will do and be careful for all of our sake. Or maybe they'll say, what they're hearing is that people understand what the rules are. I mean, I think the mayor has done a really good job of highlighting what's expected of all of us. And I think the more that message is consistent from all of us, the more people will do the right thing.
Great. Yeah, it's the first thing on the. We always start with what's going well in the school. So after we hear some good news, then that's number 2 on the agenda, and I'll pass along a short summary. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions of Carol or Ben? Okay, I just have one quick question for Ben. Basically, we are approaching the end of a semester. And are you seeing any potential shifts in the remote academy to in-house or from in-house into the remote academy?
Sure. So we've been talking about that with the principals. So a couple there are different dates for the different levels of elementary, middle, and high. The middle school, their term has just recently ended or is about to end, and they actually had a sort of a one-to-one exchange, meaning same number of students wanted to return back into school as wanted to go to remote. We weren't exactly in the same places, but literally the exact same number. Elementary doesn't ship until December 13th. I was going to put the communication about that in this communication tonight, but wanted to focus it on just the safety precautions and Thanksgiving. So later this week, early next week, we will send a email out to all elementary school families and remote learning academy families with that, that time frame. A couple things in terms of elementary. There's some limited number of requests at this point, which we're letting know that we'll change at the end of the term or end of the marking period. There hasn't been real growth either way recently. And all that could two things that could change depending on what the numbers do in terms of COVID. Also, folks may be just waiting, because we announced this earlier in the year, they may be waiting to tell us until they get notification to let us know. So, but at this point, it has not increased, a few here and a few there, but folks are sitting tight at this point. Oh, and then the high school, not until after the first of the year, I believe.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Well, thank you, Karen. As always, it's always very informative, and we appreciate your time that you spend with us. So thank you. And
My pleasure. Take care. Stay
Thank
well,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
Ben, you want to continue?
Yes. Okay. So the next step of the meeting will be led by Assistant Superintendent Greg Bach. This is as I said a few weeks ago, we would try to focus at least a little bit every meeting on teaching and learning, and that's this segment. And I'll chime in a little bit along the way, but I'm just excited to have some of our staff here to help us understand one of the most important pieces of really equitable schools, and that's knowing how all of our students, especially youngest students, are doing, how they're progressing, where they're having success, where they're having challenges, and then our teachers working together in teams to understand how to respond to that information about student learning and how to support students as they need it in the areas they need. So I'm just really excited to have Greg and some of our literacy math coaches here tonight to help us understand some of the great work it's doing and also how it's shifting a little bit. So I will share my screen, and then Mr. Bach will take over from there. Hopefully this will work. Can you see the presentation with the very bright colored pencils? All right, excellent. Greg, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everybody, and for giving us some time to talk about the state of assessment during this unusual year. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that I believe we have 6 of the 7 coaches with us tonight, and hopefully during this presentation, I've asked them if they would feel comfortable, and I think they will, just jumping in if there's a point that needs to be expanded on just a little bit. And I may pause at a moment and ask for some of their comments at key points. But the coaches who've joined us, and hopefully when we're done with the presentation, maybe we could have them turn on the cameras for a moment and just to say hello, because they have spent an enormous amount of time since last spring. They always do anyway, but since last spring in particular, and all through the summer, they met with each other and with me to prepare for the kind of work that we've been engaged in this fall with remote and modified learning. So to get started here, one of the key things, if you could move ahead a slide, Ben. One of our coaches wanted to share this quote from Henry Ford, and this one struck me tonight when I was looking at it again, because I think back to a number of years ago when we really began some of this concentrated system-wide instructional practice and data work. It was about coming together. And then, as you know, over the years, I've talked about how important it is that we continue to work together among the 5 elementary schools. And now we've been moving into the middle school as well to stay together and to continue this work. And that working together is where we are now. And it's just a testament to a really successful, sustained project. And I think Ben will share a little bit about what he saw just in the few meetings he was able to see. And I think he has some thoughts about what he saw about with people working really closely together. If we go to the next slide, please. Next, we're going to take a look at assessments because, whoops, there we go. Normally this time of year, the coaches and I, or sometimes just I, would bring bar graphs and charts, and we would talk about end of year data that we saw in June and that we had taken a look at over the summer, as well as the initial benchmark data that we had seen in September. We would look at multiple years for the kinds of changes we had seen, and we would talk about some conclusions we'd had made. This fall, we're not going to be showing you any of that data because of 2 really significant changes. And one is the adoption of DIBELS. Many of you have heard about DIBELS over and over again. East Gloucester piloted last year, and this year all 5 elementary schools shifted to the new and significantly updated version of DIBELS. The other thing that we did is that we shifted to a main assessment for literacy and math, a comprehensive assessment called STAR 360. That is absolutely brand new to us. And since these 2 major components of our assessment system are either substantially modified or completely new, it seemed really premature to show the very first data collection that we did. We have, there's a training curve, there's some challenges to assessment that we'll talk about a little bit later, and also just brand new data. And we're still trying to understand how to best gather that together and present that. The other thing that we need is we need multiple data points. And so we'll come back to you either after the January benchmarks or at the end of the school year to show what multiple data points and an additional benchmark look like as we settle into our new assessments. Next slide. Just so that you're aware of the amount of work that had gone into selecting a new assessment, I want to point out that the coaches did start talking about a new assessment last year, but in March, immediately when we saw that the landscape was shifting and that students were going to be learning remotely and there might be substantial learning gaps or specific learning gaps, the coaches really shifted into high gear and knew that we would need a different kind of assessment for the fall. And so they began meeting with each other, with principals, and also with the middle school as well, to research and identify assessment systems that would be more modern, more flexible, and give us the kind of data we might need. And what was great about this process is that throughout the spring, by meeting together in elementary and middle school, and reviewing products from 3 leading companies, there was a unanimous decision to choose the primary assessment package, STAR 360, which was selected in July. And then there was training and rollout from July through September, and then the benchmarks were administered in September and October, and then there will be progress monitoring. Some of the changes, yeah, go ahead. Whoops, I think we jumped ahead one more. Oh, no, that's okay. There are a couple, specifically in DIBELS 8th, We still assess all students K through 5. We still assess the acquisition of early literacy skills, but one of the things that is different is that now there are these subtests, which we can come back to, or we can look at now. I think we'll probably come back to this or unless there's a question, but there are consistent subtests on all the grade levels. Instead of just a subtest at 1 or 2, they do go across the grade levels. There are new subtests. And one of the bigger changes is there's now a composite score that pulls together all the data from every one of those different subtests and puts a sort of rolled up score together and gives what DIBELS considers with its nationwide data to be the best indicator of risk for students, is that rolled up composite score. Next slide. We are still doing ENI, early numeracy indicators, for math in KN1 as a screener. We did drop temporarily MBSP because of the need to sit and do paper testing with students. It seemed to be not the best assessment to use in a situation where we may or may not be remote, or where there was more contact and paper contact. Next slide. The big one is Renaissance Star 360. The other reason why I'm going over these tonight is because when we come to you with the benchmark data and the progress monitoring results, it's important for you to understand really what the mechanism is underneath everything. And we won't need to do that next time. We'll just be able to concentrate on the data. Star 360 is a big change for us, and it introduced a number of modern assessment components, including the ability for adaptive testing. So when a student answers questions in a way that indicate that they are not understanding the material, they get a number of them wrong, the assessment system will scale down or scale up depending on how they're doing to provide questions that are more within reach of that student, or questions that stretch a bit. So they will adjust, the assessment will adjust up or down. It also has a Spanish version, so we can turn that on for students who need to do a math assessment in Spanish, for example. Much more user-friendly, far better design. But one of the reasons we selected it is that it's very easy to administer remotely, and a lot of that happened this year, particularly for Remote Academy. One of the key things is that we heard from teachers is that the assessments we were using in the past sometimes just took 45 minutes, an hour. Kids might work for an entire literacy block or math block on that assessment. So from an average of 45 or more minutes, the assessment time has gone down to about 20 minutes, which is something we were really looking forward to. There is extended time available if needed. The other significant advantage is that there's a built-in audio capability for math, and students can turn on the ability to have questions read to them. We can see more, we can do more progress monitoring, standards-based reporting, focus skills recommendations, and we'll touch on this in a moment. And one of the big things that hopefully one of the coaches will talk about is the instructional planning report, the ability to now set goals and track those. And something that we will be looking much more closely at is a feature in Star 360 that takes Massachusetts MCAS data and calculates an MCAS predictability report. So we can hopefully, and we'll be looking really carefully at the accuracy for our own data. We'll be looking at how closely we are able to predict performance on MCAS from this assessment. And we also have an alignment with a curriculum extension called Freckle that we'll talk about on another night. We have 2 or 3 reports that follow. There's a simple screening report. It generates immediately, so moments after a class has finished testing or a student has finished testing, you can click right on this and immediately see this kind of a report, which is a quick screener. We can look at state standards or national standards, and it's a quick way of identifying who might need intervention or enrichment. This report is an actual Gloucester students report with identifying information blacked out. This shows, actually, I think this might, since I don't want to talk my way all the way through this, I wonder if we could have one of the coaches who has been using the instructional planning report already, maybe if you could focus in on this one, because this is a pretty helpful report for us. Would anybody be willing to share their experience with this? Melissa Francis, perhaps?
Hi. It's so strange looking at all the blank screens. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Kristen, this is a math report, so you might have to jump in as well. But the instructional planning actually looks the same for both literacy and math. And if you look at the first row with the colors red, yellow, blue, and green, that's actually stating where they took the test and where they fall, the green being at or above benchmark, the blue being on watch. So if that line, that dotted line with the arrow was going in the blue, it would show that we would be watching the student. Yellow would be in need of intervention, and then red would be urgent intervention. And then the projected score would be based on the end of the year, if they had regular everyday instruction, what their progress would be expected to be. Then it gives you the scaled score, which every grade level has a different benchmark for the scaled score, and it does change over time. So the fall benchmark scaled score would look different than the spring benchmark. And then again, you see the projected scale score just based on average progress. And then you have the percentile rank, and that's where they fall in the 48th percentile as of right now.
Yeah, and Kristen or Janet, if you want to chime in on the suggested skills piece for math.
Sure. So when you run these individualized reports, it does provide the skills that the students need focus on, either for intervention or for enrichment. So this particular child is a third grader, but you can see under the report and under measurement and data, there are grade level 2, the little, you probably may not see the little 2 in the black circle there, but they do need to work on some previous grade level skills. So this child would need some intervention at the measurement and data grade 2, and then it does also identify the focus skills within that grade level. So if you're unable to cover all of the second grade content, you can focus or concentrate on those focus skills. And it's broken up by a domain, and this is a huge change for us. Our previous assessment did not give us domain and standards details. So now we are able to see students' performance within each domain and within each of the standards.
Thank you. So one of the key things there is that within moments after assessing a student or a group of students, a teacher can go right to the suggested skills. And this answers the question of what would we do if we knew that a large group of students might be learning at a very different pace than they had from March through June of last year, and what pieces of the prior year might still be necessary to focus on. And this is a report that provides that kind of direct information specifically aligned to Massachusetts standards, so that a teacher can immediately look at this and say, oh boy, that was a piece that for one reason or another that student missed from last year, and I need to cover that. So this is a real leap forward for us.
Teachers have been very excited about that report. They've already been using that in their daily practice in the classroom, as well as during remote time. That was one real positive that came out of our data meetings this fall.
Great. And this is a sample report, progress and monitoring report. This is the kind of information we can show you with our own data later on this year. But this will We will have more data as we have benchmark and then progress monitoring, which will happen monthly. That will be a data point that goes into this kind of report over time. This is a quick look at the assessment calendar, which for math, which shows that September, October, the STAR benchmark, the ENI benchmark, and data meetings take place. November and December would be PM, stands for progress monitoring. So STAR and ENI would both have monthly progress monitoring of all students. STAR benchmark again, and that's probably when we will provide a report on data, is after that January benchmark. Three more progress monitoring months, and then I believe the benchmark in May at the end of the year. So we will have quite a bit of data to show you by mid and end of year. And the literacy calendar, fairly similar, but with STAR, DIBELS, Maze, and again, 3 times a year for the benchmarks, as well as monthly progress monitoring. Next slide. The data meetings. This is where a lot of the magic happens, most of the magic happens, and this is where dedicated teams come together 3 times a year to take a look at the data together as a group. And this involves the regular education teachers, special education teachers, the coaches, principal, any specialists, interventionists, all get together to meet in those data meetings to identify students' needs, create groups for interventions, figure out a progress monitoring schedule if it's going to be different than the monthly, and to celebrate successes, problem solve challenges, and plan the next steps. It's quite a process that the coaches have really honed over the years. So targeting needs. We had yep, go ahead, you can go to the next one. We had a national, actually internationally known specialist, a consultant who came to the district last year, was taking a look at our RTI process across the district. And when I shared the data from the previous 5 years, as well as information about how things were happening, particularly at the elementary schools, he was extremely impressed and really thought we were on the right track and had been on the right track for a while. And this is the response to intervention process that we've had in place for about more than 6 years now, which involves a cycle of identifying needs, picking evidence-based interventions, assigning personnel to provide the intervention, providing materials and training those who are going to deliver the intervention, delivering the intervention consistently, monitoring the progress, and then adjusting. This is a great slide because this is where our coaches are intensely involved in every part of this cycle, including working with and training the personnel and overseeing the intervention programs in every one of our schools. So our coaches are doing far more than assessing and collecting data. They're doing every part of this cycle and integral to all of it. So we want to take a quick look at how have things changed this year as far as interventions. I know this is a question on school committee mind, is, not only how are we assessing, but how are we providing the kind of support that students need. In past years, there was a lot of intervention for students who were both on the intensive or the strategic, meaning they needed less support. We were able to provide interventions for those most in need and those who had some need. And some students were getting double and triple dosing of interventions depending on their needs. We had groups of up to 6 students and groups that were comprised of students from several different classes, This would happen sometimes up to 4 or 5 times per week for 15 to 30 minutes or more. Now, given the restructuring of the school day, this was not going to be possible. But unlike, I'm not sure every district has been able to put in place the assessment system that we have, as well as the continue and a really robust intervention program, but we have been able to here, and with some minor changes. So if we take a look at the next slide, probably 2. So how did we redesign? Well, there is a much more of a focus on the students who are most at need, based not only where they are at the moment, but some of the historical data, and really working closely to identify those students who, based on their past, but also based on maybe exposure or missed time in the spring, who really most desperately need that help. The intervention groups are smaller by necessity, and they typically don't exceed 3 students and not crossing multiple groups. They're scheduled within the literacy math block, but the schools have gotten creative about this, and we have schools that have put in place before and after school tutoring rather than during literacy or math block, but before and after. And then schools have also explored that 1 hour when students go home after lunch or for lunch, that hour of asynchronous time that also can include office hours. That's where coaches have been working with staff members to provide direct intervention instruction during that hour. So there's a lot going on in figuring out how they can get those interventions to the most needy students. The time is limited a bit, and also the frequency is limited a bit.
Greg, I'm gonna chime in here. I missed my opportunity a little bit earlier. Just to go back to, I think you said this is where the magic happens. I think it was here, right?
Yeah, and I think you had a chance to see some of those meetings.
I did. I just want to have a couple of reflections on that. I've been working with teachers, teacher teams on understanding student learning and student achievement, through lots of means, looking at student work, looking at data that's, locally made data, benchmark assignments, national data, statewide tests, for literally, it's shocking, but 20 years or more have been working with teachers doing that. And I had the privilege of sitting in on 2 teacher teams, one at East Gloucester and one in West Parish, and young, early elementary grades. And what I saw there really was just what we want to see. It was incredible collaboration. The coaches have an important role to play in this, in organizing and supporting teachers. But what really needs to happen is it needs to be teachers' work, and it absolutely was. Teachers were fully invested. First of all, one thing I noticed is that folks are experienced in doing this. Gloucester teams, teacher teams have been doing this for a while, where they look closely at student learning. They bring in their experience, expertise of working with that child every day, but it's informed by a variety of assessments that they have support in doing. The coaches support them in doing that. We have great tools for them to understand the data and look at it and analyze it. But then the key thing there, because a lot of folks can do that, and many districts do that. But what I saw in these team meetings was a one thing I saw was teachers knowing their students very, very well, knowing what might be causing some challenges, knowing how they operate and what they'll respond to, and then working diligently to identify when they could support them and who should best support them in some of those focus areas, those focus goal areas. And it really just was really a high level examples of great collaboration, great professionalism, and a real commitment to understanding each child for who they are, their strengths, their challenges, what they bring, and how to help move them forward. And it's that level of care and concern and really expertise that our teachers, our teacher teams really bring to this. And they've got good tools, good support from the coaches, and they we're showing great leadership. So it's something that is hard to do. Many places don't do it well, but it's something that I think Gloucester and our teams here really have a good handle on it. It was great for me to see and was really powerful to be part of those meetings. So I just wanted to make sure that I was shared that with folks, because it's a key indicator of how we support our students, particularly those who need to get up to standard or move beyond standard.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think people know that I'm a big cheerleader and have been for a while, not only of the coaches and their work, but the entire process, the teams that have come together, the teachers' work over the years that have allowed our elementary schools to move so significantly in those the statewide indicators that I've shared over the years. But it's great to have a set of eyes from outside come in and really confirm that we got a really good thing going on here, and a really finely tuned machine. So, and a lot of hard work from everybody. So some good news, not that there has been bad news so far, but just to summarize the good here, in a relatively short amount of time, and with a team that saw a challenge in May and really in March, stepped on the gas right in March, before that month was out. They were already working on this to redesign and implement basically a new assessment for all K-5 students, and to know and understand during the summer that there was a potential for remote instruction, and certainly the likelihood of a portion of our students being remote, and to design an assessment system that would allow all students to be assessed. Because not only did we open a parallel remote school, but every single one of the students, whether they're in person or in remote academy, have had those assessments. It was quite a feat to be able to do that. Being able to redesign and implement a student intervention system, and also to build in a flexible model for learning in case we need to shift from in-person to remote. It's really impressive to think that that could be done in a few months, when it's something you typically might plan for a couple of years and implement. And the coaches, the teachers, the principals, everybody in the teams worked incredibly hard to put together the entire system to assess and respond in a short amount of time.
And so I think our last one is just to see if folks have questions.
And I'm hoping you do have questions, because this is where we have still have, actually, if the coaches who are still with us could put on turn their cameras on. Melissa Francis, Christy Lambert is here, Alex Osborne, Kristen Parsons, Janet Donovan, and Melanie Stansfield. We have the opportunity of having most of the coaches with us tonight. And boy, do they have a wealth of knowledge and quite a few years of experience in our district. And they've been working in all the schools and behind the scenes, and there's almost nothing they wouldn't be able to answer. So I'd love it if you wouldn't mind asking some questions.
Joel?
Thank you. Obviously, a big thank you to everyone for the work you're doing and for being here. So a question I have is, Greg just went through a lot of the achievements and a lot of the way that your team and within the district staff has been able to adapt to the situations. My question would still be, looking at what you know now that it's in place and implemented, is there something that you still need, something that you think would make a difference and even bring us further along this kind of this evolution that we've gone through in rapid fire succession? Is there one thing if I just had X, I really think I could do something significant with it?
Boy, is that a great question to ask this group. Don't be shy.
Yeah, this
I
is.
guess they're all set.
He just opened up a whole world, so don't be shy.
While they're thinking, because they usually have a very long laundry list for me. But while they're thinking, I know that one of the things we will be talking about later in the year or in budget season is they did a lot of research to pick the best assessment array of assessments for our students for now and for the future. And, you know, that came with a price tag, and that's something that we will want to make sure that we are committed to continuing next year. So that's more thinking ahead. But I imagine they've got some ideas about what they wish we could add on to what we have.
Yeah, whether item or a piece of software or even just a retooling of a schedule. Is there something that,
Yeah, I think I saw Melissa's hand go up.
Christy too. And Kristen.
I was going to add on to just the Renaissance subscription of the Freckle pairing, if we could explore having that, which aligns student practice with those skills that we had talked about on that report. So
yeah,
extending our subscription to have that option.
Do you want to expand on that just a little bit? Tell them what Freckle is. And I should mention that the middle school is, we did get a subscription for the middle school and they are exploring that, but maybe you could share a little bit about what that is.
Freckle is an online practice platform that has state standard alignment. Anybody want to help me here? Where students could independently go on and work on skills that STAR has identified for them to have extra in practice.
Right. So where, Joel, where you saw that report, which is really a new one for us, where immediately it will identify grade 2 skill that needs to be addressed. The Freckle system, which integrates with Renaissance, and we didn't purchase it for K-5, allows a teacher to assign particular areas for practice in that system, and it meshes with those lines to those exact skills that need to be addressed. So the student would then be able to work independently once the teacher has identified those exercises and opportunities for learning in that system. So that is something that it would be nice to explore further and possibly add and pilot a little bit this year.
Could be in or out of grade level practice.
Yes, it can be above or below the grades. Yeah.
And my real wish would be like math interventionist, like dedicated paraprofessional that could deliver all the math interventions. That would really be my one thing that could be a big game changer.
And I second that. If we win the lottery, that is absolutely what would bring us to the next level. Dedicated math interventionists.
Just one person that could, be assigned to go through the grades and just deliver the interventions that we need. Because right now we try really hard, but we are certainly not always equipped with the staff that we need to make it happen.
Alex, I think I saw your hand up. Alex Osborne, I'm from Plum Cove.
Hi, friends. I'm so sorry. I think you already answered what I was going to say, but the neat thing about Freckle too is that it talks to STAR. So based on how kiddos do in the STAR, when they sign into Freckle, they may be assigned a passage at a certain reading level based on how they did, and that's constantly updating based on how they're doing. So it's really enhanced technology and super fantastic. And math interventionists and then continued support for literacy interventionists and all the support that this committee gives to our group is really fantastic. So thank you. It's hard work that we do, but we all love it, and your continued support is amazing. Thank you.
Christy Lambert, yeah, go ahead.
Hey everyone, thank you for your time this evening. I'm Christy Lambert. I am the literacy coach at Veterans, and part of the work that you saw tonight that went into the PowerPoint comes from the work that we get to do through our own professional development. We've worked really closely with Melissa Orkin from Tufts University as a group of coaches, and I know that Kristen and Janet have worked closely with Becky Lord, and they really both have been instrumental in helping us shape our practice so that we can better coach the staff that we work with. So just the continued support that the district has given us in our own professional development and teacher professional development has been really essential and helpful. So if that could continue, that would be wonderful.
And I just want to say, make sure you ask us that question again, because we're still in the midst of learning about STAR. So we're piloting this year, but we'll have plenty of ideas to come.
Other, sorry.
I just want to add one thing here, which is a lot of what we're talking about here, especially with Freckle, but other tools, is really about individualizing and personalizing learning. You know, and that's such an important, I mean, we talk about differentiation. That is really, really difficult for teachers to do, especially as you get an upper elementary where kids start to spread out more in terms of their, where they are. And something like Freckle, which can adapt to how a child's doing, where it's so hard for a teacher to find many resources, many types of work for students to do across a wide range. And something like Freckle, or the resource that we're talking about here, allows teachers to do that, and then give that, and then really provide students with individualized work that adapts to them, can adjust as they adjust and they develop. And with paper and pen or old tools, that's just so onerous for teachers to do. So any tools like this that we're looking at, whether it's an assessment that adapts, or in this case Freckle, that really is some of the leading edge work that helps our teachers differentiate for kids based on their capabilities, their challenges, and their strengths.
Kathy, you had a question?
First, I want to say that I'm just amazed by all the work you do as a team. It's having educators on our call is so refreshing. I don't think it's been so long to have other faces and smiling faces and productive, very productive people. And I want to remind everyone, we had another math coach in our budget for this year. So we definitely had earmarked resources to add to the capacity. And I know it probably would come in really handy, given that we now have basically a 6th elementary school with the remote academy. So I applaud you for everything you're doing and still smiling about it, given all the work that you've done. But my question is, how are the assessments working online with the remote students? How has that been going?
So I can say that, it was definitely a little rocky at first, just to get the technology and making sure everybody was working together, and figuring out the break rooms and figuring out how to get a first grader to the break room. All of those things were interesting, but I would say today I did the progress monitoring for first grade, and it was leaps and bounds from the first time around. So the kids are starting to understand, people are settling in, the anxiety is settling down. And the happiest news I have to report is they're making progress. So even with this platform of learning, they are making progress in their learning, and that's what really matters. So it's happening. So it's really great news to.
Yeah, and I should add that some of this STAR 360, for example, you can do in a whole group, and kids can do very easily remotely. But a number of these assessments require one-to-one assessment. And so the teachers had to work very closely with the coaches, and they had this sort of air traffic control system set up where a student would pop in, pop out of a Zoom session, and then one after another, the coaches would conduct that same assessment that they used to do in person right over that Zoom call, and they really had it down. They did a lot of assessment over a few weeks.
I would just add on that of the 6 classrooms in Remote Academy, the coaches divided up the workload. Reading coaches did it a little bit differently than math, but in terms of either taking your home school or divvying up within a grade, so that we could be in contact with the teachers regularly in setting up the meetings. And yes, breakout rooms, and sharing your screen and having little ones read numbers off of a screen through a computer to you while you quickly took the record on the other side of the screen was interesting. But for kindergarten and first grade, they did it, and they did it well, and it was exciting. It was scary to think about how are we going to do this, but it really worked. And I'm set to do progress monitoring tomorrow.
Laura, you?
Thank you. Yeah, and I reiterate, I applaud all of you in this crazy moment. I just have a question with all this assessment. How, once you move away from the assessment, all these, different levels in the in-person schooling, since the kids can't move, how's that working? I mean, you can't really group children right now. So I'm just wondering how you're doing that.
So folks are getting super creative. We have the best teachers here in Gloucester, and at a moment where people could panic and take their foot off the gas, I see people accelerating and really working hard to reshape everything that we do. Right, in elementary school, we're used to small teacher table. Right, 6 little friends are on a table, and then other friends are working collaboratively, and we had to throw all of that out this year. So I see people getting super creative. Kids positioned in the room and a teacher moving around. So instead of having groups come to her, she's moving around, and everything from, you also see kiddos usually on a rug and a teacher there with a poster going through letter sounds and things. And, how do we get this up on the big screen? And how are we using some enhanced technology to manipulate sound cards and things? So I see people really being super creative and reshaping what we normally do in this new world and really rising to the occasion.
I just want to add to that one of the things that we did to be creative is give some of the interventions remotely so that we are able to combine classrooms so they are at home safely in their living rooms or wherever they are, and the interventionist will go on the screen and provide some of the interventions online during that 1 hour after lunch. So it's probably not as great as it would have been, face-to-face in class, but again, we're making it work and they're learning, so it's happening. And again, a few glitches along the way, of course, but it's getting easier and easier. You can see the shoulders starting to relax and people smiling underneath their masks. So it's good to see.
I will add on to it's a little bit different in each school, but they are getting very creative with spaces. So at one school, they are going to the library and they have enough tables that they have one student at each of the tables. So they're more than 6 feet apart and the teacher's standing and rotating around. And another is having a table in the hall and having just 2 students spread apart so that they are keeping their distance. So getting creative with spaces, and it does look a little different at each school, whether you're in the cafeteria now or a library or remote.
Melissa and then Samantha.
Hi, I actually don't have a question, but I just want to echo the comments about how really awesome it is to see your faces and hear your enthusiasm. I mean, I think this is the first moment of normalcy I've really kind of felt in a long time at a school committee meeting. So it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your presentation tonight and hear all the great things that are going on. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say thank you because I don't know when I'll see you again, but thank you all for your hard work and dedication for what you do, because you truly make difference in our kids' lives. So thank you.
Samantha?
Thank you. I'm curious how the assessments work with English language learners. Do you use the same assessment? And if so, how do you find it? Do you find it helpful? Do you find your work more challenging? How do you find that this assessment is supporting those students?
I can Janet, go ahead. You go first.
I was going to say that I think it varies child to child, but what's really nice about Star 360 is that we do have the Spanish option. And we actually used that over at Beeman yesterday morning with a child who speaks no English. And the teacher suspected that she had some really strong math skills. And sure enough, she came out in the blue, which is a watch, which was really a strong beginning score. So that gave us some good information about her. It depends. I mean, sometimes it might be a child who speaks a completely different language that we don't have access to that. We may have to wait a while. So we're in communication with the teacher for when the timing might be right on that. Again, in the math, the nice option is that it will read it to the child. So if they're learning English, they can take that pressure off and it's read to them. And typically in math, of course, they're a little bit stronger in terms, most of them know most of them numbers. And so I have some beginning numeracy skills.
Can I ask a follow-up about that?
Sure, Samantha, go ahead, Samantha.
So what happens if we don't have access to their language? How does that work?
Well, if they are brand new to us, they may be working with the ELL teacher really to get all of that social academic language first, and then we might test them in a bit. That's what I meant when I said it really depends on the child and the situation. So we might not have a score right out of the gate, but eventually we will.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? Well, I'd like to thank you all for all the hard work you do. And as Melissa said, it's refreshing to be talking about education again instead of masks and trying to get kids into school and all of that stuff. So, Safafia.
Yes, well, I didn't know if Ben wanted to tell him the little text he sent over and how proud he was of his school and his system and everything else. And so let me see if I can get it. He says he's so proud of this. Yeah, smile. Go ahead. You know what? We are proud. We setting examples. I am so proud of everyone because it's not easy. It's not easy. The most difficult decision I believe that the school committee had to make ever in their lives was whether we do remote or hybrid or whatever. So, and I'm very thankful that, you know what, I know we are rising in numbers, but it's not in the schools. It's, things happen. But he was so proud and he says, you know what, May, I know what you should do. And I was so busy. So I sent the whole thing. He sent me a little picture. He's so proud today. He says, picture of the week. And he was in the classroom and he was talking and the kids were in there raising their hands. And I'm going to embarrass him. Hold on, I'm getting there. A little bit of patience will be there. I have too many texts with too many people. So he was like, well, maybe we should get the big guy, meaning the governor, come down also with, the schools. And it goes like this. On Thursday, November 12th, the Governor Baker Secondary went to talk to the schools and everything else. He says they've got nothing. Let's get the governor to visit our schools here. Commissioner Riley visiting the schools. Carl said, well, of course, wealthy suburbs. Let's get the big guy to come here. He says, not the wealthy suburbs, our world, that we're here. I sent the whole exact thing, including the picture, to the governor. He goes, you didn't. Of course I did. And he answered back. He says, we'll be there soon, promise. And Ben goes, you sent him the whole thing? I says, well, yeah, I was busy. I don't read your stuff. No. But you know what? That's how proud is when you can tell the governor, you know what? Never mind where everyone has all these and they don't have all the, what about us? What about all the challenges that we've had in the city of Gloucester? And yet here you are. So all teachers and staff members and workers and everything in our school systems, thank you. And that that your superintendent got in trouble for it. No, he says thank you too, because the big guy said he promises he's going to come. So that's how much you and your classroom and what you're doing and the faith that you put in us to have in you. So thank you.
Thank you, I think, Mayor. I'll just chime on that. I mean, what I appreciate about this group is that, you are really, you're sort of, this group represents all this other work that all of our teachers are doing, and this is a K to 5 group, but you do great work, but it's the work that is done together, by the teachers, with the coaches, that you support them and are great supports. But it couldn't happen if it wasn't all working together, like I said before. And that's what I see here coming to Gloucester is this great collaboration, but also it's great collaboration focused specifically on supporting our kids to get to the next level, to improve, to know them well and help them get to the next level. And that collaboration, which you symbolize, I think, just tonight you're symbolizing, you're speaking for it, really crosses all of our schools. And it's a real tremendous strength of the system. It absolutely is. So thank you. Greg, and it's nice to see that Mr. Bach here actually shows his face too after a while.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the coaches for taking their time tonight to be with us. Also that Adrienne Ricky Munn couldn't come tonight, but she put in a lot of hours on that PowerPoint. She worked with Melanie Stansfield and then took it and really did a nice job with that. So I wanted to thank her and all the coaches for giving your time tonight and for all the work you do day in and day out. Nobody knows better than I do, and I appreciate it every single day. So thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah,
You are-
thank you.
Thank you all.
You should run away when you get the chance.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Great. Thank you.
So Mr. Pope, is it okay if we continue with
Yes,
updates?
yes,
Sure, great.
yes.
Couple more updates. Thank you. Share my screen here. Here we go. So a couple updates. First, on the East Gloucester Veterans Building Project, we'll go over the timeline. We'll talk about the process for the request for proposal for swing space, which we need to identify. And then I'll give a sort of quick update on communications and outreach. So, oops, hold on. So here's our new improved timeline. The dates aren't changed, but the information is clearer and the information is clearer and it's better presented thanks to Amy Pasquarello. So, so now that we've passed, the vote has been successful, the funding vote. So we're here and getting ready. So geotechnical inspection is happening over the next week. We'll have a couple small rigs on site that do borings, so hole borings into the ground there to check the soil for foundations. We are working, and we'll discuss tonight a little bit about the work to identify, seeking swing space and need to identify that and prepare that, before the end of June, and then supporting the veterans school moving out of the school, in the beginning of the summertime. So the site is cleared. That allows us to begin the process to breaking ground. That includes site preparation, that security fencing, making sure that things are very safe there before anything happens. And that includes site preparation and then demolition of the school, and then foundations and construction. That goes from July 2021, that begins this upcoming summer and goes all the way through April 2023. So almost 2 years of construction. Then substantial completion happens in late spring, early summer of 2023. And the school opens and both school communities move into the new building in the fall of 2023. Then further on beyond that, of course, is we can't prepare the open space at the East Gloucester site until after those students leave. So in June 2023 and that fall into summer 2024 is when they'll have the restoration of the East Gloucester site, demolition of the building, and then restoration to open space. That will have a process ahead of that time to determine exactly what that space will be used for, and if any alterations for either play space or other passive uses need to happen. So that's the timeline we're on, and it's I'm glad to show it a little more clearly than we've seen before. In terms of one of the areas we're working on now is to identify swing space. So a request for proposal has been developed. It's actually been developed and it's out there in the public. It was released on November 12th. It's listed for 30 days and is due back on December 15th. And then once that's reviewed, I'll talk about the review process in a moment. Ultimately, the school, the accepted vendor, so to speak, or site comes to the school committee and the veterans in the building committee for approval of the successful proposal. In terms of getting to the successful proposal, there's criteria for swing spaces in the RFP. We listed here. The most important function is that we have the space for learning. We may not be able to have all the spaces, but we clearly listed out in the RFP what spaces we need. classroom spaces, small group instruction spaces, spaces for, having lunch, physical education, art and music if possible. And then of course also office space for administrators, and then, small group or sort of our related services. And again, it may not be possible to get all the spaces in a single site, but we want those folks who submit proposals to know what we're looking for. It needs to be ready for occupancy by July 2021. We would like it to minimize the need for transportation, so that means proximity to the Veterans School Zone, and obviously within the budget we have laid out, or the city has laid out in terms of swing space. We are also seeking that the property owner prepares the building for occupancy. So those are the main criteria for successful proposals. In terms of review of the proposals, in all RFPs, a review committee, in this case, would be named by Mayor Taken. That would, at this point, consist of 2 school department reps, myself and perhaps Matt Fusco as the building principal, 2 city department representatives, most likely including John Dunn and one other person from the city side, and then likely one school committee member. It would make most sense for it to be one of the school committee members from the building committee because of their familiarity with the project. That review committee rates each submitted proposal based on the criteria and the scoring that's in the RFP, and then ranks them. They rank them without looking or without seeing the cost proposals for each bidder. So after they rank them, then the cost proposals are unsealed and reviewed. At that point, they rank those from the highest to the lowest bid. But what's important to know is that by the city process, we do not have to operate on a low bid in this process. But if the review committee does not take the lowest bid, they need a clear explanation, clear rationale for the final selection. Often that happens because perhaps the lowest bidder can't actually fulfill, isn't situated enough or prepared to actually fulfill the needs of the proposal, in this case, the swing space. That's why often communities when they don't take the lowest bid, that's often one of the reasons why. As I mentioned, the proposals are due on December 15th, and then they'll be reviewed after that. That's all I think I have on the RFP process. Any questions about that review before I go into communications and some of what we've been working on communications?
Melissa? Melissa, go ahead.
Can't hear you, Melissa. We can.
The drawbacks of living in Magnolia, apparently. That sometimes you can't be heard.
Melissa, we couldn't hear you. Can you try? You want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Wrote 3 questions down since you started. I'll be as quick as I can. In the first slide, you were talking about the timeline. Will the softball field be able to be used this spring? Or will we be doing, will we be investigating on the property and making changes to the property so that can't happen?
Great question. That's one of the things we've been working on. The softball field will be able to be used through the end of the school year. And then we're looking for contingency or alternate site, perhaps at the high school, but we're actively working on that to make sure there's continuity and there's a space for any of the softball teams to continue to play. Absolutely.
Thank you. And the criteria, I see that I thought I saw that the Building and Finance Subcommittee was coming up with the criteria. Did I read that correctly? Or was it the Building Committee? Was it the Building Committee or our?
Wasn't BNF.
Building.
No.
It wasn't BNF?
Sorry, that was the building committee. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so will the school committee tonight be discussing that criteria and voting on it? Or is
No,
it all done?
it's all submitted. Yeah. I reviewed it with I can't remember if it was program or, I reviewed some draft criteria. I think it was with program or maybe building and finance. I can't honestly remember which group. Program. Yeah.
Joel?
At the full level. And then my final question is, it says within budget, what is the budget for the swing space?
So let me get back to you on that while we're talking.
Yeah, it's part of the $4.2 million that was appropriated to include all of those things. But I think my recollection is the budget for the swing space was around $1 million.
1 million for 2 years
Well,
of using the space?
the budget is not, it's not what we're trying to spend. It's you know.
Right. Yeah, well, I just saw that it had to be within budget was part of the criteria, so I just wanted to see where we were at with that.
If it's anything different than what Jonathan said, I can look it up while we continue this discussion and let you know.
Thank you.
Okay, Joel, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm going through the process, and just there seems to be a lack of school committee involvement in this, especially seeing as the RFP went out without any input from the school committee. And it's an educational decision as to where we house students to educate them for 2 years. And so this building committee or this subcommittee that's going to review responses could come to a conclusion and say, hey, we think, place X is excellent, and it can get to the school committee and we could say, we're not going to teach students in there. This is a terrible place for teachers to have to try and convey education, and so I'm curious as to why the school committee has been left out of the process of figuring out where students will be taught for 2 years. And if there's a way to get the school committee more involved, you think even if it goes down to the building committee's, jurisdiction, you think they would have at least requested input from the school committee as to, hey, people in charge of where these students will be educated, what would you like to see in swing space before we simply go out, ask for something and then select one for you,
Well, the criteria for the what we need was fairly straightforward. I mean, it was not specific to, other than how many classrooms and where, location and that sort of thing. It wasn't, and that was developed in conjunction with the purchasing department. Essentially, they started with the RFP for swing space when we needed swing space for West Parish, and they modified it for the veterans' needs. The school committee, it's the city's responsibility to house us. The school committee will be able to look at it, when they come in, when the proposals come in, and if they have objections to what gets picked out, that would be our option. I don't think we have to accept it if there's something that we don't want.
I also want to be clear that the draft criteria was shared with the program subcommittee in a public meeting, and also that I want to clarify one thing, not to misinterpret what Jonathan said. I developed and reviewed the RFP and the criteria and also the scoring on it. So it had the leader of the school systems very much imprint and input on, and really development. So it was really developed by me based on that conversation in part, but also based on speaking with the principals and meeting Mr. Fusco and Ms. Pasquarello, and also based on the learning experience from West Parish as well. So so that I want to be clear that it was not developed just by not that Mr. Pope intended this, it meant this, but the formality of the document was developed by the purchasing, but the criteria was developed by led by me.
Melissa?
So 2 things. Can you hear me first?
Yeah.
Double check. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to compare this to the last project that we did. We built West Parish. How many rooms are we looking for with West Parish compared to what we're looking for now? Is it bigger difference in space? Because I know there's not many spaces in Gloucester that have a lot of space. So
Yeah.
West Parish has one extra grade per,
Yeah, one
so is
extra
it a
class.
matter of 5 or 6 rooms or something, or is it more?
So it's 6 rooms, six rooms
Okay.
more. And I mean, 6 rooms fewer, sorry, 6 rooms fewer.
Okay.
One at every grade K through 5. And then as you remember, I believe, right, I don't remember this, but 5th grade was housed at O'Malley, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's
And then-
actually, it's less.
Okay.
It's less students than we put in that we needed to house West Parish, even with the
Yeah,
5th
but-
grade out.
Okay, great. And then I just want to say I agree with Joel about the school committee being in the process. And I know we talked about this at the communication subcommittee that we had too. The school committee being involved and being vocal during this project is important to get the messages out to the community. And our charter does say that the school committee is responsible for furnishing and putting fixtures in the school. So I just hope that the building committee keeps that in mind as we go through this process, and that when we meet every 2 weeks, we should be able to have conversations about what's going on at the new building project and be able to weigh in on that to provide guidance, because it is the school committee's responsibility as well. So I just don't want to lose sight of that as we go through the project.
In terms of the review of the RFP, any proposals that come in, this process was explained to me by John Dunn, but certainly the number of folks on the review committee, it doesn't have to be one school committee member. I'm sure it could be more. If that's one way, in terms of the actual review of the proposals, the committee would like to be further involved. This is sort of a way that this is following sort of a tried and true process, or the process that the city operates on in terms of this review. But the numbers of people, I imagine, can be adjusted if the committee wishes. If that would help.
Yeah, just to, respond to a couple of points. First off, the swing space was discussed once at programs, and it was discussed, the agenda item was talking about figuring out ways to, utilize buildings that the city already owned for swing space. And as well as we talked about, consolidating school population prior to the new school being built. And secondly, at that time, I think, one of Mr. Lemus's slides said, the facility would need to have food preparation capability and that sort of thing. So I don't think that the program certainly never saw the draft RFP before it went out, and certainly took no action on it. So I don't want it to seem like programs really reviewed the RFP itself. We had a discussion about swing space and a discussion about potential use of city buildings. And I may have even in a meeting said, okay, we'll continue this conversation. So I'm surprised, or I wouldn't rely on that conversation with programs to be, in any way providing a requisite level of input to the building committee or anybody else as to what the school committee is looking for. And then as far as that review committee goes, at this point, it's too late. The RFP is out there. That was the time when the school committee should have stepped in and said, hey, if there's something you're looking for in your swing space, we need to get it listed in this, because as you all likely know, if something comes back compliant with the RFP and we start adding in conditions, that weren't initially put in there as reasons for, selecting one over the other, you run into the issue that we're violating the process, and you say, well, hey, you never said you needed X, Y, and Z, so denying us for not having X, Y, and Z is really unfair to us.
Okay. All that came out of the building committee was the need to get the RFP out as quickly as possible because of the timeline. And we instructed the city to proceed on developing an RFP to be ready to go after the vote was taken. So the building committee is not part of this process, other than how it fits into the overall project timeline. So it's, the RFP is very general as far as what we need. I mean, I sent it out to you, so you've all have seen it. So as far as the review of when it's, we're not going to get responses until December 15th. It'll take a certain amount of time to resolve the response and pick something out and come to terms with with whoever the successful proposal is, and then there'll be work that has to be done, and I suspect there's going to be a fair amount of horse trading over who does the work, whether the city does it or the owner of the property does it, and we need to have it ready by July. So there is a time consideration, is all I'm saying. Melissa? We can't, Melissa, are you frozen?
She's frozen.
Yeah, well, Joel, we'll go to Joel.
You there, Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, so I said my question, I forget what it was. So the RFP is due back on December 15th, and say there are a couple responses. Is it my understanding, am I correct to say that the school committee will be able to make a recommendation to the building committee on what we as a school committee believe should be the correct placement for the kids?
Not sure, exactly sure. My understanding of the process is the review committee would make a recommendation, and then ultimately the school committee has to accept it.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong.
No, that's exactly what John Dunn explained to me, that the group that reviews any RFP is the review committee that's appointed for that, specific those specific, process. It isn't the actual school committee, but as Jonathan just said, the school committee then, has a chance to approve that or not.
But the school committee is involved in the decision. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Involved, you're not involved in reviewing all the proposals. No, you are involved in reviewing the recommended not the recommended submittal or submission.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. The school committee has a voice in whether or not the place will be provided for.
Right.
Okay.
We can accept or reject the recommendation.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Joel?
Sure. So just, to first on that point, that really doesn't give us the agency we should have, because here's how it goes, right? So they're going to go through this whole process, and we're going to have a meeting in January and say, okay, the building committee and the city purchasing department has, selected this location to house veterans, up or down school committee. And then if the school committee has questions or concerns, we're going to start getting the RFP went out in early November, and we got to get this thing done because school's going to be opening back up in 6 months from now. We really don't have time. If you vote no on this, we have to go back for another RFP, and we'll be doing this all spring. And so we'll get the song and dance about why we really can't say no. And at that point, we'll have no chance to provide input onto the space we're looking for. We'll provide no input onto our preference among the people who had submitted bids, and it'll be given to us like with this sense of urgency that we really don't have a choice. We got to either do this, and I just think that's, we're setting ourselves up for that. And if we go forward like this tonight, we are complicit in removing our agency from actually, and actually providing input on this process. And again, even going back, just like the terms of the RFP, I tried to find it just now on the city's website. I'm sure it's there somewhere. I couldn't find it right away, but that 13 classroom thing, was there, again, I'm just one voice in the school committee, but if we had said, well, at the end of the day, those, 4th and 5th graders are really never going back to an elementary school. We fit 5th grade, we fit 3 5th grade classes at O'Malley once. Maybe we can fit a 4th and 5th grade set over at O'Malley. Then geez, now we only need 9 classrooms. Another more options for swing space below 10 classrooms that, may not bother putting in a bid, or may put in a bid but get rejected because they're not meeting the 13 classroom standard. I'm not saying this committee would have necessarily agreed with me to lower the requirement for space, but that's a conversation I think the school committee should have at least had before the city put out an RFP to house these students. And I don't know what we do going forward if there was enough passion in the committee for this, and I'm not saying there will be or won't be, to say, hey, listen, we really want to, request that the RFP get pulled and get reissued after proper input. Maybe that's something we could do, but otherwise, I don't really know where we go from here. But certainly waiting until the whole process is completed and we're given a yes or no on one option, that's not really much of a choice at all.
Kathy?
I just want to reiterate what Ben had said, that, he and his staff or Matt were the ones involved in the requirements of what what are the educational requirements that we're trying to mirror and accommodate. And the building committee had no role in that as a committee whatsoever. And it was purely administrative. So I'm not quite sure. In my opinion, that's where that description belongs, coming from them. Now, Joel, I think you're talking about probably more scenarios as to what might be, what variations can we possibly see coming back in terms of RF, for responses. But my understanding with the RFP process, it has to be pretty specific of requirements that you have to, that are objective, not subjective, right? And that's why there's this rating system and everything else, because when you're asking for somebody to fill X, Y, and Z, you don't want X plus 1 or maybe X minus 1 as an option. So as and I think with West Parish, the same thing happened. Talina worked with the superintendent and described how many classrooms they had. What does a school look like? What does a school have? And the biggest issue with West Parish was the school community not being happy that they could all not be together. So I just know from that process that was a big concern, is keeping the school community together during a transition, which was going to be a little disruptive to the school community, families and staff. So that's the history on how West Parish happened. And if, and maybe we'll be faced with a similar thing with veterans. If they, RFPs don't come back where they all can fit, then it's a different discussion.
Samantha?
Thank you. In the program subcommittee, when we talked about this, I think we were all on board with sort of talking about possible different scenarios, thinking outside of the box. But then, if I remember correctly, we kind of came to the conclusion that we might unfortunately be in the same position that we are this year, where we have to think creatively about space. And so I don't know if anybody wants to jump in about that conversation, but I think we all sort of agreed that trying to fit or anybody in an additional school from vets might not be the best course given the current pandemic situation.
That was correct.
Okay, so I do, I think that it seems like with the program subcommittee was really trying to think outside the box, but I think we kind of have to stick to that 13 classroom model, and it seems reflected in the RFP that that's the case. So that's the only input that I have in terms of like what was put in the RFP. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily oppose more input in the selection process. Because I do agree with Joel that if we don't agree, that we might be too far down the road at some point. So I don't really know how we go from there. But, I personally, based on our conversation with the program subcommittee, feel comfortable with the RFP. I think it's just maybe more input in the selection process so that we don't get too far down the road.
Jonathan, you're on mute, but I see Laura's hand up.
Okay, I said Joel had his hand up, but
Oh,
it's
well,
gone.
I was just going to confirm what Sam said, which was that, we had raised this and then we realized that O'Malley's space issues were different this year because we're using it for the model that is currently in place, and we have no idea what the future holds right now. This will be reflected in when I report out on the communication subcommittee, but I do think, I do think this speaks to getting the school committee more involved in the building committee work, sort of, and that's something we discussed, and I'll report out on that. And I think that also, reiterating what Sam says, like if we only have a yes or no vote in December or January, it's hard to go from there. So what if we vote no? And then what? So if we actually want to have a meaningful contribution, and I don't know, again, I also don't know what this would look like, but is there a way that we could review the submissions or have some, without sort of taking the process off the rails, but sort of incorporating the school committee earlier and more deeply in this, so that when it gets to the end, we just don't have a yes, no, because that really isn't so much of a contribution at that point.
Joel?
Thanks. Sam and Laura recall correctly that I brought up a specific thing about, using O'Malley or whatever. But again, as I mentioned earlier tonight, at the time, Ben's slideshow said the facility would need to have food preparation capabilities. And I'm still looking, I see like the summary of the RFP, but I don't know, did that go out in the final RFP that we need to have food preparation capabilities? And like things like that, are all, because like the last time we had swing space, we had to have another kitchen in town, make meals, and there had to be like bussed or driven over and that sort of thing. It's like, that's like one component of something that was discussed briefly at programs, but no action was taken on. Then there might be things like that as far as, what these spaces look like, what these spaces, how many floors. We're looking for something that's, 1 or 2 levels. We're looking for something that has, certain internet connectivity ability, like that sort of stuff, right? Those are all decisions that impact education that I don't think the school committee provided input to. And those would be, again, at this point where the RFP is out, and I'm not hearing, the committee rising up to say, hey, pull it back and reissue it after you get our input, at least on the selection portion of this, it would be nice to have some input to say, hey, we, the people who are gonna have to administer this building for the next 2 years and decide on the budgets and what we're gonna be, putting into these buildings. We'd like some say on what these buildings or building is going to be.
To answer your direct question, I'm looking, I don't remember the need for food preparation capabilities as being part of the draft criteria. It isn't in the final one. As you can see from the RFP.
Ultimately, it's the city's job to provide us with housing. It's our job to ask for it and to ask for, what we want. I don't think that we have had, when we decided what we were going to build for a new school, the educational plan was developed by the administration. The educational, the educational needs were developed by the administration. I believe it's the same way when we did West Parish, and I think it's the same way when we did the swing space for West Parish. So I just have concerns about the process here. But if you want to have input on, there's only going to be, if the RFP is overly specific, we may not get any responses, because there may not be anything in the city that qualifies for it. Chances are any responses we get are not going to meet our exact wants or desires. It's going to be some sort of, can we make it work sort of situation. If it's all right, I mean, there's nothing written in stone that it says that the makeup of the review committee has to be specifically, I mean, what's been suggested in the past is that they have 2 people from the city and 2 people from the school department and a school committee member. So that's essentially 3 people from the schools and 2 people from the city. If you want to expand that, I could certainly ask the mayor, and she's here, if she'd be willing to expand it to 2 school committee members, then before school people and 2 city people reviewing and rating the proposals. I understand the need for input, but I'm a little wary of the school committee wanting to be in control of building buildings and renovating buildings, and which is not in our purview. So, Joel?
Thanks. I mean, again, Melissa cited the charter earlier today. I think it is in our purview of where they go. And, if it's up to the city, the city could be really prudent and say, you know what, we just fixed the field house. The roof is solid. We're going to put up a bunch of, cubicles and some false walls, and you can go move vets into the field house for 2 years and cancel your athletic, and we as a school committee would be furious about that, right? But the city wanted to just do that. That's the cheapest thing for them to possibly do, right? But it's not great educationally. And you want there to be some sort of ability for us to say, hey, no, you're not going to put us all in the field house for 2 years. That's not a great way to educate students, and it impacts the high school students, right? So there has to be some level of us being able to say the choice you're making does or does not make sense educationally, for the district. And so to try and solve this, why wouldn't it be this review committee? Is it advisory to the mayor, or is it actually, that the vote the review committee takes is binding? Because if it's advisory to the mayor, why not just have them come present to the school committee? The non-school committee members say, hey, listen, we got together and we think the following, and then the school committee can receive that report and also make a recommendation. And then if it's up to the mayor to make the ultimate call, she'd have our input, she'd have the input from the other staff members, and she'd, if it is up to her, I don't know.
Jonathan, you're on mute. Jonathan, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. The process is that the review committee would rank all of the proposals by the criteria that they've set forth. And they would then come up with the one with the, whichever one had the highest ranking, they would then open the financial proposal of all the rest of all of the proposals. And then they would reconsider. And then if they couldn't come to an accommodation with the first ranked one, they would go to the second ranked one. That's kind of how it works. That's how it works when we pick out a designer or anything where there's a request for proposals, a designer or an OPM or any of those things. Like I say, if you want to put more school committee members on that review, I think we could make that case to the mayor to appoint them. But they're
I am
appointed.
here. I'm not deaf. I'm
They're
listening.
appointed, but they are
I'd like
appointed
to
by the
say-
mayor.
Well, yeah, you know what? I don't have problems with having transparency. I don't have problems working that because guess what? When you guys chose the administration office and forced me to pay $300,000 a year for something at Blackburn, you didn't come contact me. And when you needed all those things, you didn't contact me. And I didn't just fix things, I repaired them and put new things. So I don't know if you think that I'm not here and listening to your conversation, because when I try to stay calm, and then if I do speak, you guys roll your eyes or you look the other way or you get angry because you know what, sometimes the truth hits. Well, I wish, Joel, you were around when we did West Parish. I wish a lot of you, oh, wait a minute, you guys were. And I had to pay $1.2 million to restore St. Anne's, to pay rent after. Oh, that's right, you were a citizen. That's right. I rather have more teachers because, no offense to my school committee, you're not teachers. You're not going to be there for 8 hours when there's no COVID or be there or whatever, and what's handicap and not handicap and what's needed for special needs. We're not that experienced. So I don't have mind adding more teachers or principals or members. I don't mind. I don't mind us looking at whatever proposal comes through, look what we need to make it efficient for our teachers, our staff, and our students. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that, Joe. I just wish that when you guys did all that and you do your budget and everything else, you wish all of that too, because that'd be kind of nice if we all had that kind of input, because we're still have administration office that when we try to say, let's try to merge with Pathways or other things, you guys, well, you didn't like it. When we try to say, why do we have at the last minute, we have to pay rent on a place like we could have used it, or could have used St. Anne's, you guys didn't like it. When I said, well, why don't we put veterans at St. Anne's and then put the administration in at veterans because we can't because of special needs, you guys didn't like it. So now you're saying all these things. That's great. I have no problem, Jonathan. You know what? There's so much we have in the city of Gloucester. I really thought it was great, the presentation we had from our teachers. They had to learn new things. If the teachers from veterans and the teachers from East Gloucester want to come and do a tour, whatever site we have and whatever we need to look at, they're going to have to be there. I have no problem with that. It doesn't have to even be a school committee member. It can be more people. You know what? We're looking for more people anyways to be on the building committee. And if we ask for 2 more people of your school committee, I think you might have a quorum, because I'm 1 and then 2's already there and 1's there. So you're looking at 4. So it might not be realistic, but to bring it in front of everyone and to show for everyone, well, of course, there's not a problem. The problem is like you said, $1 million, what are we up to, please? And how we're going to do that. We've gone this far. Let's not argue. Let's just move forward. Let's figure out what we have, get the RFPs, get them in. I don't look at the RFPs. It's up to them to say, we have these. But Joel, you can sit on the RFPs and open all those envelopes if you want to. Right now, there isn't any, but you can. I have no problem. There's nothing to hide. It's all of us together. It's our children. It's our teachers that have to be in there, not us. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add to that and say there's never been a circumstance in my entire career on the school committee where the city has come and said, you've got to do this. This is what we want you to do. Okay, everything's been a collaborative effort. I just, the insinuation that the city's going to shove something down our throat that we're without talking to us or taking in our consideration and making sure it's going to work for us is just not correct. Okay. Melissa.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay,
Yes.
great. So I just want to be clear. from my past comments and to the mayor and to her comments too. I'm not looking to change the process for the RFP. I think that process will work. Having two members, one member on the committee is good. If we're going to put more on if we are afforded the opportunity to put more on that committee, then I think we should vote on it as a whole committee, because I think we all might have different ideas. And if that person's going to be involved in the selection process, that could create an issue as well. All I'm looking for is more conversation at the school committee level about the decisions that are being made by the building committee. I think we have every right to. I'm going to give you a little pushback when you said that we're not in the business of building schools, because we are. We're the one that took the vote to do that. We're the one that are in charge of the fixtures and the furnishings of the school. So yes, I believe the school committee should be involved in the decisions. How we do that is questionable. I think it's just a matter of having more conversations like this, and you and Kathy walk away with knowing our position, and then that voice is put on the building committee. So I'm not trying to change anything. I believe in the processes that we have, and I trust in the processes that we have, but I just want to make sure that the building committee knows that it's clear the school committee wants a voice in the decisions that are being made, and I believe we have a right to that voice, because we are in charge of the schools. And we're grateful for everything the city does, but we're a team. We do it all together. It's not the building committee making all these decisions. It's the school committee and the building committee together.
Any further discussion? Okay. Let's move on. Superintendent's goals and evaluation process.
Jonathan, I'm just looking at the time. I'm happy to keep going and go through this with the committee. If the committee wants to, we're not in any rush at this point to discuss these. If the committee wants to consider them more, you have the documents, and at the next meeting, that's fine, or I'm happy to go forward. Just want to check with the committee on that, seeing I think we're a little bit later than we may have expected.
Okay. Well, we still have 3 subcommittee reports and a number of action items and an executive session. So without objection, we'll table the discussion about the superintendent's goals, unless somebody has an objection. And we'll move on to committee reports. And the first up is who gets to go first? Program subcommittee. Joel.
The program subcommittee, the issue was the goals, so I will withhold that report until we take it up.
Okay. Next up is the ad hoc subcommittee on communications.
Great. So this meeting was meant to discuss communications around the building project. So we had I thought, a very productive conversation. We talked about how best the school committee can work with the building committee related to communicating with the community about the ongoing project. So we talked about the audiences for our communication, and then the short and long-term nature of communications, what's happening this month, what's happening in 6 months, et cetera. And after a very productive discussion, we came back to a few key points. The need for more robust updates from the building committee to the school committee, including having building committee minutes in our packets. Our consensus was that at this point, it makes the most sense to keep with our existing points of contact between the school committee and the building committee. So that meaning Ben and then Jonathan, Kathy. And Ben had said that he would go to the building committee and bring this discussion that we had in our subcommittee to them and our expectations to them, and then come back with what they've come up with. Some specific things we're asking for from the building committee and or those managing construction are clear calendars that are distributable to the community and key documents. And we also discussed reaching out to Ward 1 Councilor Scott Memhard for his assistance in building effective communications. So that's basically what we discussed. It was quite interesting. And the big message was that we need much more robust communication between the building committee and the school committee.
Okay, I did speak with Scott Memhard today and told him of our concerns about trying to reach an expanded audience, which seems to be the problem. We don't have any trouble reaching the 60 or 70 people that always listen to or tune in, but it's the rest of the world we need to talk to. And I'll be talking to Barry Pett, counselor, Ward 2 counselor, tomorrow about what they might do. I suggested that if they had any ward meetings scheduled, that that the people from the schools and the building committee should do a presentation. So that has been done, but and we'll talk about the building committee is not meeting again until December, I can't remember, the second Thursday of December.
December 10th, I believe.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
And then I checked in with the project team to make our my expectations, and also the ad hoc subcommittee the discussion, those expectations clear to them. And a couple of things to report on that. One is, a lot of the good communication, information, documentation, begins with the building committee's work. And what I mean by that is, if the building committee is putting forth, documents ahead of time, if the presentations they're doing are clear, not on a technical basis, but clear to the general public and clear to, therefore also clear to the building committee members. If the building committee knows what it's going to be addressing ahead of time, and that material is developed ahead of time, distributed ahead of time, and then presented in a way that the general public can understand it, then we can use those documents, one, to share with the school committee, but also to make sure that they're publicly available in a variety of ways, particularly on our website and that sort of thing. Another piece that I learned in checking with the project team is that the building committee actually has had I just didn't know this, sort of a communication sort of subgroup. And we're gonna sort of revitalize that subgroup, and that will help us with, in a few ways. One, for example, the community representatives can help inform the school communities on an ongoing basis. But then another piece of that is developing updates about the process, the progress we're making. And then the other piece was reaching out to the city councilors to make sure that while we can easily contact the school communities, it's harder for us to contact the neighboring community around the veteran site. And so that's why we're hoping that the city councilors will communicate, with material we give them. Other areas we talked about were public forums, both for the school communities and the general public, on occasion when we are, every couple of months, that sort of thing, as a way to engage people. Also boards on each site, both at Veterans and East Gloucester, that'll have project updates as well. I think I might have missed one or two, but it does begin with, and the good news there, going back to the communication subgroup, is those are some hands that can help do the communication. It's often helpful to not have the technical experts, meaning the builder or product managers, do communication, because we want communication to be less technical and more understandable to the general public. And so that's why the building committee members can help with that, and we'll work with them to do that. And that'll also mean we have a little greater bandwidth on communication and keeping folks updated. I do want to also just remind folks is that that all the documentation is on our website and always has been on our website. Not easily navigable, we understand that, but I do want to just remind folks that whether it's minutes from old meetings or presentations or official documentation that's been submitted to the MSBA, it is all there, it's documented well, but we do want to increase the frequency and we want to increase the accessibility of our communications, whether that's to the general public, the school communities, or the school committee as well.
Ben, can I just to mention, when I think about communications about this project, I mean, I know that the presentations are there, but to go through a 20-page PowerPoint, I'm thinking we really need sort of one-page clear
Yeah.
things, and I know, and it may be that some of it exists and just needs to be broken down, or that it can exist from presentations, but the accessibility piece is really key, as you know, and to be able to sort of put things out that don't require work, because people just aren't going to do the work to dig through the website or even a presentation. So as much as we can sort of, and I understand the building committee, that's great. There's already an existing sort of group,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. And the reason that's crucial to have some folks in the building committee help out is because one of the things I think when I hear you say that, Laura, one of the things I think about is, sort of brief summaries of what happened at the building committee meeting or what the building committee will be discussing. And that takes someone or some people to actually draft those. They're not hard to draft. They take some time. But as long as the building committee can help with that, then you're not relying on someone like me who honestly finds it, it'll be very difficult for me to keep up with that. But if the building committee can help out with that, that's one of the pieces I think we can do a much better job at, is making it easily accessible, digestible, informative, and then as people want to go deeper, they know how to go deeper if they want to go deeper.
Right. And part of that is publicizing that, right? So if the community wants to be listening to those meetings, they can get whatever that summary is that someone's written, and then we publicize it and say, this meeting is happening at this time.
Yeah.
Another
update on that is we are setting regular, monthly meetings at certain like we meet ostensibly every second and fourth Wednesday. It'll be that sort of schedule, monthly schedule as well. And we can publicize those well in advance. So that's another way the building committee can operate in a way that helps the community have regular access to it and the work it's doing.
Great.
Anything else? Then we'll move on to Building and Finance. Kathy.
Hey, the Building and Finance Subcommittee met on November 12th. And we had a pretty efficient meeting, which was good because we'd had a second meeting prior. So the first item was the food service budget and update, and we are running a deficit of approximately $20,000. The way we have to deliver food and distribute food is very time intensive. So even though our meal count is down both at the middle and the high school, we can't really look at payroll and staff because we need those, we need everybody that's packing those meals and distributing those meals. So it is going pretty well. And included in that deficit is about $15,000 in equipment maintenance. And I think historically, since I've been on the committee, we've always had a difficult time funding equipment maintenance or new equipment within the operating budget of the food service. And our goal is always to break even. But those, bigger expenditures have always been a challenge to take care of through the normal operating. We got an update on the fiscal 2021 budget and where we are right now. And we are, still on track to not go over budget, given all the increased expenses. Of note was that the substitute costs are lower than we had budgeted. I think we had discussed in part because it's hard to find substitutes. And the schools seem to be making do and still covering everything with the staff that we have. As you know, we have decreased both general supplies by 15% as well as the curriculum supplies budget. But we do expect that we'll spend the remaining amount of those budgets by the year end. So that's the report on the this year's current financial status. We went over the fiscal 22 budget calendar update where we discussed having the meetings with the principals and department heads in the first week of January. So those schedules will be sent out to everyone. I think we agreed on a 4 o'clock start time, and I can't remember the exact days of the week that we're doing, but those meetings will be open to everyone, and we can all ask questions at those meetings, and that will be the first week in January. The last thing to report on, which is an action item. Do you want me to take the action now, Jonathan?
Yes, just
Okay.
the buses, yeah.
Yeah, the buses. So as I reported before, Adam has been looking at how we do our bids for our transportation services, our leasing, and he did some more research, and he came to us with a recommendation that we basically go forward with an RFP for looking for a 2-year term on our buses. We've historically done 3-year terms on our leasing. But given that we've had pretty good success with the maintenance and everything on our current buses and their low mileage, we thought this time we would both do a 2-year leasing bid and then figure out what that looks like to have either 5, how well do buses last over 5 years, or, so in the future, we would know if 5-year leasing is optimal or continuing back with the 3-year leasing. So, so we do have an action item, and so we did recommend to the full school committee the approval to proceed with the request for proposal process for the leases of buses. And I so move.
Second. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry if I missed it, Kathy. These are used buses.
They're used buses with lower mileage, within a certain mileage, and it's a 2-year lease term.
They can be used buses. Okay. Unless with less than 30,000 miles, I think it is what it said. Any further discussion? Maria, could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Yes.
It passes unanimously. And that concludes BNF, Kathy?
It does, yes.
Okay. Then we'll move on to action items. And we have a couple of grants. The first one is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Targeted Assistance Grant for Gloucester High School and O'Malley Innovation Middle School in the amount of $30,000. And I so move.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Okay, seeing none, could we get a roll call vote, Maria?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Yes, and I don't have a link.
Okay. We hear you. I don't know. Okay. Well, it carries unanimously. There you are.
I said yes, and
Yeah.
I said I don't have a link when we go in executive session.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear the executive session part.
Hear you again, Mayor.
Okay. We have an Education Foundation grant to fund a remote learning center project part-time consultant in the amount of $3,750.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay. Is there any discussion? So this is a grant to fund somebody to, is this for the library?
No,
Is that
so, sure, I can happy to explain. So we're working with the GEF to identify, to build on the remote learning centers we have right now. One at the high school, one at the the middle school, and then also Sawyer Free has created one as well. And looking for other opportunities around the city when we go fully remote, or even before that for kids, to have a supervised, lit, warm, safe place to do the remote learning, whether that's in the sort of at the second half of the day, or whether that's, for high school kids, who are remote in the first half of the day, or if that's whether we go fully remote at some point. And what we've needed is some support, in which the GF is funding to identify location, partner organizations, locations, demand, and sort of really sort out some of the logistics and operations to see if there's something really there. And so we have sought out the help of former principal Ellen Sibley to do that work for us, and she's engaged in that and doing a great job so far to answer some key questions for us.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Could we get a roll call vote, Maria?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. It passes unanimously. The next order of action item, we'll skip over the superintendent's goals. To request the city administration to secure swing space for Veterans Memorial School from July 2021 to July 2023. As this is just a formality, it's a little late, but it still should be seen through that we have actually sent a letter to the city saying we need swing space for the schools, for veterans for the 2 years.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Samantha?
Can you just explain again what this is?
Okay, it's
Been done?
when the schools need space. So when we needed the space, when we needed to relocate the preschool and the administration, we had to make a request of the city for them to search for a space for us to move to. It's just a formality. If we need it, I mean, I think we did it when we said we needed a new elementary school. It's just something, it's in the charter that the school committee has to request of the city for their building needs. So it's just, we're going to do it for the preschool building next. Okay.
Thanks.
So it's just a formality. It's like I say, Joel?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote for it, but it's only a formality because we as a committee have accepted it being made into a formality. This could have been a real thing, and our letter could have said, "Dear City Administration, we would like you to find swing space, and here are the things we would like you to look for," et cetera, et cetera. It is only a formality because we, the committee, are lying down on this and allowing it to be made into a formality. I'm still gonna vote for it because it's already happened, and obviously we need to check this box, but it didn't have to be like this. It could have been an actual robust thing where we did, our part in the process.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Yes.
It carries unanimously. The next order of business is to request to the city administration to renew the lease at 2 Blackburn Drive. And this is a little more complicated. The lease runs out. The lease runs out at the end of this school year, but if we want to renew it, we have to notify them by December 31st. And it has to, I believe, go through the city council. So maybe not, I'm not sure, not 100% sure about that. Well, before we have discussion, I'll just move the motion. And do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, so discussion, Laura.
So I know that this building has been a source of contention for years. And I guess my question is there an alternative? I mean, do we have a choice?
So the situation is this. When the lease ran out the last time, we explored opportunities of within our existing buildings. And we looked at the high school and we looked at the middle school, O'Malley. And the high school did not really work, but there was potential space at O'Malley and then we got some prices on, what it would cost to house the preschool there. It would be down in the lower level. It includes the auxiliary gym. It includes what's currently art rooms and some other administrative space, and some meaning that where the bus facilities are. It also has some space that is separate, where you could have outside play space that's completely separate from the middle school. And it also has a potential of having a road, so there would be drop off right directly to it without going through the school. But the cost of doing it exceeded the cost of buying the building, and the city decided to renew the lease, and that was with a lot of input from the school committee at that point. The situation right now is this, that the lease includes a provision where it can be bought. The building can be bought. It can be bought at any time. If we notify them that we want to renew the lease, and then in February, the city decides that they want to buy the building, it can be done at any time. The advantage of them notifying the owner that they want to renew the lease before December 31st, if that's what does happen, saves the city $20,000 a year. If we don't renew the lease, notify them by December 31st, the cost if we try to do it in June, the cost would be $20,000 more than it would be as long as we notify them. But by notifying them, like I say, it's a money savings thing. Doesn't mean that we couldn't buy it or we couldn't explore other options while, in the process.
But I guess, so the mayor referenced pathways. I mean, I know there's a long history to this and it may not be the time for it, but, I'm not talking about, it doesn't seem like this is a perfect building, obviously, or even close. And I know, the mayor just referenced pathways. Are there other places to be looking? Not that we want to open this up again, but that building is very flawed. And I'm just, before I vote to recommend to renew the lease, I just would like to know if there are other choices for any parts of this.
Kathy?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the building is flawed. It may not be perfect, but I think feedback from families and educators is that it's been serving the program pretty well. So forget the process on how we ended up there, but I'm just curious why you say the word flawed.
Well, I'm not a preschool teacher, so if the preschool teachers think that it's working well, that's great. I hadn't heard that feedback, to be honest. So I'm just operating from, my limited knowledge of it, but it is, it is a place that people can't walk to. It's hard to get to. That's one part of it. you know, I'm not an educator. I can't speak to it. I have not heard positive things about that building in general.
Joel?
I just want to go on the record to state that I represent the landlord in other matters. I do not advise him or discuss this issue with him, but nevertheless, I'm going to abstain from this vote to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest.
Okay, duly noted. Like I say, the lease has expires in June. Or no, it's in July, I believe. Our option right now is to try to come up with, find another space by next September. Renew this lease for another 2 years, or buy the building. None of which, we'll make our recommendation, but all of which, I mean, we can say we want to build the building, but unless the city appropriates the money, that doesn't happen. It wouldn't come out of the school budget. It's not our, we can't just decide we're going to buy the building. So we're just asking them to renew the lease, or notify that they want to renew the lease, which is, this is a request from John Dunn, because it says it's going to save the city $20,000 a year if we do that. So essentially the numbers right now is we're paying $375,000 a year to occupy this building. If we notify them before December 31st, the rent will still go up for next year to $380. But if we don't notify them and then still want to stay here, the rent goes up to $400. So those are the numbers. Laura, go ahead.
So I understand the reason to give early notification. I totally understand that. So my reading of this lease, though, is that we would have 2 more years on this lease, and we could decide to buy it or not, but then our lease is complete, correct? So in 2 years, if we don't, or if the city council decides not to buy this building, then we have to find another building. Is that right?
That's correct. Or try to rent it again. I mean, it's the argument could be made that we should have bought it in the first place. The argument could have been made that we should have bought it the last time it became, the lease was up. We've been here for we'll have been here for 8 years. There are a couple of considerations about buying it. One is that the interest rates are incredibly low for the city right now. The other is included in the rent pays for the janitorial service, the heat and electricity, and the city also collects taxes on the property. So those would go into the equation when you consider about buying it.
If we say we're going to renew the lease now, and then given these historically low interest rates, hypothetically, we could then, in a month or two, recommend to the city council that that the city buy the building.
Right.
I'm just trying to think about
it can be bought at any time. At any time in this, it can be bought for the given price that's stated in the lease, the 3.7, I believe.
I think Sam wants to ask something.
Yeah, Sam?
At what point are we going to start discussing whether or not we're going to buy it?
Well, I think we should discuss whether we want to, whether we whether we want the city to buy it or whether we want to explore other options, soon, in January, February. Because even if we want to go to someplace else, it's not going to happen in a year. Unless unless you know of a school that's out there that we could just buy, for less money. You know what I'm saying?
So I realize that the decision right now is only to renew the lease, but I think if we're going to continue the conversation about whether to buy it or not, could we please get feedback from the preschool staff? I just feel like that would be really helpful, because similarly to Laura, I have heard mixed things about the building, specifically about the outdoor space. And I think it would be really helpful before we continue this conversation to really hear honest feedback from the people who are in the building teaching.
Yeah, yes, that definitely be a part of the process. Without a doubt.
No, I think we seriously should look at alternatives. But I don't think we can do it and have an answer, have anything that would be ready to go for next September, given all the things that we have on our plate already. So I think it makes sense to ask the city to renew the lease. Kathy?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree. It does take a while to plan, what the alternative might be. And we, clearly don't have the time to do it. But second, it's working under the current, COVID restriction model. It's not ideal because everything's pretty cramped there with administration. But for the next school year, it would be hard. We'd be hard pressed to find a place we'd go to between now and then. So it does make sense to have that savings and the fallback position that's where we're going to be next September.
Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you, because I just saw that I got disconnected for a minute, so I apologize to keep asking that. So I have heard great things about the preschool. I haven't really heard any negative other than the play space outside needing a fence. But I do believe our enrollment went up significantly when we did move into this building, and parents did say how happy they were with the space. But what my concern is when I came home today, I had a flyer in my mailbox stating that the YMCA is going to be opening a preschool very soon, and they're looking for attendance in that program. So I do think this needs to get on our agenda to discuss going forward the use of this building. But at the same time, it will be interesting to see if there's an impact on our enrollment in the preschool and if our needs would be the same a year from now. So there's a lot to consider, but definitely I'm in support of renewing the lease for 2 years, because I think a lot's going to happen over the next 2 years. And the city, of course, will make that decision whether to buy it or not. It's up to them. But I think putting this on the agenda for February or March somehow, just to keep the conversation going, is a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Just so everybody who's listening knows, the preschool, we're required to provide special education services for students after they come out of early intervention until they're ready to go into kindergarten. So that's 2 years and 3 months, as I believe. And that's the purpose. That's why we have a preschool. Anybody can have a preschool, but we have to provide special education services for some students who are severe and some who just have disabilities. And so that's our so trying to partner with other organizations like the YMCA or Pathways is not as easy as it might seem, is all I'm saying. But those are the kinds of things that we need to explore. If there's a potential to partner with other organizations to provide the services that we're required by law to provide, then we should look into that. If there's space within our existing buildings that could be retrofitted to provide space for the preschool and the administration, then that should be looked into. But like I say, right now, we just need to ask the city to renew the lease. Okay, any further discussion? Roll call vote, Maria?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Abstention.
Mr. Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Present.
Thank you very much. It passes 5 in favor and 2 abstaining, or 1 present, 1 abstaining. I don't know if there's a difference. And we'll move on to the next issue, which is a report for the MASC fall meeting from Kathy Clancy. You're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to both see what I have on my screen and do that. So the delegation from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees was held on November 7th. There were 10 resolutions that were before the delegation to vote on. They did the vote similar to the way we do our consent agenda. So the resolutions that were passed without discussion were Resolution 2, which is COVID-19 state funding, which basically says we expect the state to provide funding for expenses related to COVID. Resolution 3, anti-racism resolution. Resolution 6, the retention of Medicaid revenue. Resolution 8, membership of a school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And Resolution 9, equity for LGBTQ students and staff. Those were all approved unanimously by the delegates. The first resolution was the one that we all received many communications on the MCAS testing, MCAS and high stakes testing. And this is the one that had probably the lengthiest discussion. The discussion centered around, time on learning, and in this current year, the importance of kind of doing a hold on the MCAS for this particular school year because of everything else we're doing and the reduced learning time that we already have because of the 10 days that we did not have at the beginning of the school year. We all know districts are doing their best to have as much time on learning, but it is less probably overall than a typical year. One of the committees brought back concerns from their committee on both the use of high stakes testing. They thought that wording was somewhat judgmental and weren't sure about that particular inclusion of the wording. And then the moratorium aspect of 3 years. A lot of people wanted to talk about the pros and cons of MCAS, but the discussion then got brought back in to say we are talking about the implementation of these exams for this year and what's in this resolution, not the merits of the MCAS. So the vote did pass, and I did vote favorably for it because I had heard from a couple of our members, but I also read the large amounts of communication that came to the school committee, which we all received. And the fact that this year is going to be similar to last year, where there's just no way technologically, as well as time-wise, that our attention and efforts would be probably even able and feasible to administer MCAS, let alone the value of what those MCAS would provide this year. So I was happy that a committee brought up this concern about 3 years, because I thought that was taking it a little too far. Year by year is probably the way we should be thinking about this as school committees. So that did pass on a vote of 112 to 9 with 2 abstentions. The next resolution that was discussed was lowering the voting age to age 16 in municipal elections. The resolution passed on a vote of 65 to 49 with 4 abstentions. Resolution 5, increase federal support and stimulus funding for public K through 12 education. And an amendment was proposed by the Framingham School Committee to strike the words through the enactment of progressive tax legislations, which was part of that resolution because people didn't want to earmark where that funding would come from. They just wanted to basically say we need more funding. And so that amendment was approved, and the resolution as amended was approved 117 to 1 with 1 abstention. Resolution 7, attempts by the U.S. Department of Education to direct public funding to private schools, passed on a vote of 108 to 6 with 1 abstention. Resolution 10, monitoring of attendance of students during the pandemic. And that motion was tabled so the motion was tabled on a vote of 71 to 34. So that is the report. I know in the future, we should be looking at this a little bit prior. I think we probably all would have liked to have had a lengthier discussion on the resolution number 1. And if anybody wants to consider putting this on a future agenda, I would suggest if we wanted to take a formal position on MCAS testing for this particular school year, I think I would suggest to put it on the agenda because I do think it merits discussion, both in terms of cost, time, and usefulness. So, so Jonathan, you can think about that.
Yep, we can do that. Is there any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We need to go into executive session for the purpose of, I gotta put my glasses on. We need a motion to meet an executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purpose. As an open meeting may have detrimental effects on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and to return into open session only to adjourn. Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have 2 items. We have I believe, an MOU with the paraprofessionals, and as well as an agreement regarding leaves under COVID to talk about. Okay. So we got a motion and a second. There's any discussion? Roll call vote, Maria. We'll be going into executive session only to come out to adjourn. So.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Mayor Taken.
Yes.
And you got the link? Everybody's
I
all
did.
set to go into the Google Meet? Okay, we'll see you all there.
Maria, are you there?
All right, everybody's here?
Okay, adjourn.
Motion,
Second,
roll call vote, Maria?
Samantha,
Yes. Night, everyone.
Laura,
yes. Good night,
Kathy.
everyone.
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
Happy
Jonathan.
Thanksgiving if I don't see everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes,
Jonathan,
yes.
Melissa. Melissa
She's frozen
Melissa?
again.
Frozen, yeah. Yes,
and Safathia.
yes, let's go. Good night.
Happy
Motion to
small
meet.
Thanksgivings, small Thanksgivings.
Meeting adjourned. Stay
night,
safe.
everyone.
Virtual
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Here's the
Smart.
turkey. You want a piece? Too bad.
Good night.
Good night.